You can see from the agenda that we're doing some interesting stuff tonight. We've got district payments and controls from the auditor's office, elections, the new required training on avoiding sexual harassment, and then we'll do a little fun thing with the special districts jeopardy. And now it's my privilege to turn the mic over to Supervisor Vanderpool for the official welcome.
Thank you very much, Barb. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's event. I think it's a very good opportunity for each and every one of you to receive a level of training and a level of information from some very professional people with expertise in these given subject areas. I want to first of all thank county staff for volunteering their time, from the auditor's office, the elections department, and of course county council for putting this together, and IT for all of their work to make sure that this event and this meeting is documented. How many of you have been to a Government 101 session before? So we've got a lot of return customers, and great to see you coming back for more. How many of you hope that this is something that we can do on an annual basis to provide you with adequate training for your respective elected positions or appointed positions? Great to see as well. So there's the documentation of the need that exists for you, Barb. Barb said that we didn't do it in the last few years because I didn't follow up and ask, and I said, well, hey, the need is there, let's keep it going. But this is something that started, I believe the first one was in 2009 or 2010, and now we are on rendition, I think 6 or 7 sessions, and I do believe we've either recorded the audio recording, or in this case the video recording of each of the previous sessions, and those should be archived for you to be able to call upon should you need that. But this night is for you. Take advantage of this opportunity to gain knowledge and ask questions from these various experts who are here. I know that when you're in an elected position or an appointed position as a board member, we have a lot of questions, and sometimes there aren't a lot of answers, or when there are answers, they cost you $100 an hour or $200 an hour, depending upon the attorney that you call. And so tonight is a free event, so to speak, for your districts. This is something the Board of Supervisors has authorized this time, and also the provision of meals for all of the attendees. So I definitely encourage each and every one of you to take advantage of it. This is a wonderful opportunity for you, and I hope that this is a productive evening for you. Should you come up with additional ideas of subject matter that you would like to have covered in a future session, please don't hesitate to share that with Barb or any of the county staff members who are giving the presentation. We want these sessions to be productive for you. So please, please, please don't hold back. Ask, and we will do our best to deliver. So again, thank you on behalf of the Board of Supervisors for all that you do to serve the constituency that we all represent. And I hope that tonight is a very productive evening for you. And I look forward to many more sessions that can provide you with the information that you need to be effective at your jobs. So thank you very much and have a wonderful night. And I hope the food's good too, by the way. Enjoy.
It was good last time we used Corn Cafe. And yes, just to follow up on what thank you, Supervisor Vanderpool. And just to follow up on that, we do have an evaluation form that was part of the materials that you picked up, and we really do rely on these. We do everything we can to come up with new topics, but we run out of ideas, and so things that you tell us are great, and things that you tell us about when and how we do this. We have continued to do it as a 4-hour evening thing once, because we get a good turnout and people seem to like it. If that's horrible, you'd rather have it during the day and quarterly sessions that for an hour, great, tell us that. But we do really want you to fill out the evaluations and let us know what you think. And again, we're thrilled that so many of you want to come out, and when we weren't offering it, we were getting calls from people saying, well, when are you offering the next one? So that makes us feel good about theoretically providing value for your time. So in light of that, and valuing your time. We'll get right into the substance of our presentation. And our first one is from the auditor's office with Paul Sanpietro. His biographical information is there, so I won't read that to you, but he is the Chief Revenue Officer with the auditor, so he knows all about payments and things like that.
Thank you, Barb. And I know my title is Chief Revenue Officer, but it's kind of a misnomer. I'm in charge of accounts payable, or many of you will know it as the Claims Division of the Auditor's Office. I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce my boss, who's sitting in the back, Cass Cook, the Auditor, Controller, Treasurer, Tax Collector of the county. Anyway, we wanted to take some time and go over some of the common issues that we think are relevant to your district. And like Barb said, if there are other issues that you would be interested in having us present on, go ahead and relay that to Barb or to our office, and we'll make sure to include that in subsequent sessions. So, like I said, tonight we're going to be talking about the common issues that we think are relevant to your districts in regards to paying your bills, district payments, and district controls, the financial controls that you have in place that support that payment structure. So, the first half of this presentation will go over, it'll be somewhat a refresher. I noticed a lot of you have already been to this training, so it'll be just kind of a brief overview of the forms that we require from you and the forms that we send out to you all, and some of the common issues that we see in our office. The second half, we're going to go through, like I said, those financial controls that we would expect to be in place at your district and that support the infrastructure that supports making your payments timely and safeguarding the resources that you are holding in trust on behalf of the constituents. So, and feel free anytime during the presentation to just ask a question if you need clarification, or if you want me to expand a little bit on it, or if you just have a general question, feel free to ask. So this is our payment voucher request form. Nothing real fancy here. This is where you will put the detailed information so that when we're processing your payments and we're drawing checks off of the county treasury for your vendors, we know exactly which budget line that needs to come out of, and any other pertinent information you want there. But the primary, of course, I had highlighted in red. I don't know if it's in color on your handouts, but there's the OBJT, that's object, just another word for our expense. That's the expense, 4-digit expense account that we'll want to make sure you have on there so we get the right budget line. Next form is the order to disperse, and the order to disperse form is really the one form that holds the whole batch together of invoices that you're paying or vouchers that you're paying, and this is your authority. So if you're the manager, how many of you are managers or bookkeepers? Okay, how many of you are board members? Okay, all right, so this is kind of both sides of the coin here. The order to disperse is where the manager, the bookkeeper, will present all of the payments that need to be made to the board, and the board needs to authorize those. Our responsibility as the auditor is to make sure that if we're releasing funds from the county treasury, that it has the board's authorization and it's not some unilateral activity from the manager. And we'll get into why that is a problem later in the presentation. Also, we have the budget. Each spring, our office sends this form out to you. It's 4 pages. I just put 1 page in here to highlight. And that's sent out by Roger Martin in our office. If you haven't dealt with him already, he'll send that out to you this spring. And this is pretty straightforward. This is where you'll tell us your expected revenues and expenses for the year. And again, this would need to be authorized by the board, usually at a regular board meeting, or if you need a special board meeting, depending on how often your board meets. We need to make sure that that is authorized by the board, and then we will input that into our system, and that will serve as an additional control on the money that you request for checks. And I'll go over that in a little more detail later as well. I wasn't going to go too much in detail on these, but this is just a listing of the reports that you're already receiving once a month in the mail from our office. In general, these reports are a way for you to reconcile your bank accounts, make sure that everything agrees and that your cash looks good. And it's also a way to make sure that those expenditures that you've made, you can see those in a budget to actual comparison, and you can check on your budget and how you're doing. One of them I just wanted to highlight, just because it's kind of becomes an issue sometimes, is the trial balance, the summary trial balance. And the reason I want to highlight it is that for the first part of the fiscal year, most of you, I believe all of you, are July through June fiscal year. So that first half, July through December, when you look at this report, the cash balance will be the accumulated through that time, but it won't include the beginning balance because we haven't closed the books in the system yet, as we're still preparing the financial statements. And so to get your current cash balance on those first 6 months, you simply add June 30th balance, which would be your beginning balance at the beginning of the fiscal year, and add that to the cash balance you see on the report, and that will give you your cash balance. And you're also free, of course, to call our office at any time if you want to know your balance, and we can get that information for you very quickly. Another reminder, each year our office collects your audit reports, and those, of course, are due within a year after the audit has been completed. And so you want to make sure you get those in timely. And those can be sent to that email address there, which is SD, a special district, sdaudits@co.tulare.ca.us. And also there, you can see there at the bottom, there's a link to the government code if you want to research that any further. Okay, so these are just a few quick items wanted to go over on preparing the payment vouchers. As far as our staff is concerned, we're very happy with how you guys are preparing everything, and hopefully you're happy with the service we're giving you. But these are just some quick reminders. So make sure that you, of course, like I said, you get all the signatures from the board if you're the manager or the bookkeeper. Before you submit those payments, make sure you provide the full, correct account string. That'll make sure that your budget doesn't look wonky later when you're looking at the budget actual. Remember that the deadline to get checks for Thursday is by the preceding Friday at 5 p.m. You can fax that information in, you can email it, mail it, or drop it right by the office if your district is around town.
So the payment vouchers can be just emailed into Roger, or?
Absolutely.
You don't need to send a
If you
paper
can
copy?
scan them, yeah, if you can scan them and send them in, yeah, absolutely.
Great.
As good as a fax, as good as anything. And if you're out on the edges or the peripheries of the county, you may supply us with an express paid envelope if you want us just to mail them when they're available, so you don't have to come all the way to Visalia to get them, to get the checks. So in addition, like we talk about budget, you want to make sure that you have adequate budget. That's your authority to pay the bills. You want to make sure you have adequate budget, but also you want to make sure you have adequate cash in the bank. And that's your ability to pay. And so, like any bank, we're not going to issue checks if there's not adequate cash. And we will, from time to time, if the district finds themselves in dire straits, we have seen this issue before, we won't release vouchers until the cash is brought back to a positive position. So, just wanted to, sometimes there's also confusion regarding budget versus cash. Like I said, budget is your authority to pay. Okay, you might have, agreed, we're going to spend this much this month on this, but if you don't have cash in the bank, of course, that's not going to happen. And alternatively, if you have cash but not budget, we'll need an adjustment from you signed by your board as well. So the budget issues tend to come up more as the fiscal year comes to a close and you get close to some of those budget amounts. We don't put controls on every line. We'll control your budget overall, meaning if you're going over budget overall, then you're going to be getting a phone call from us. But otherwise, if it's in individual lines, we leave that up to you to manage. Okay, so now I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about controls, financial controls, or they called internal controls. These are those, like I said, the infrastructure that you have set up in your district to prevent errors, fraud, waste, abuse. And so I just wanted to kind of go over a few of the common core controls that we've seen over the years. The first one is the lack of policies and procedures. Anytime you're in a business, you want to make sure that that's running efficiently, right? That you're not spending more than you need to, and effectively. That you're getting what you need done. It's, you exist for the public good, and so if the district is unable to run, the public good suffers. So at best, sometimes the policies, if you do have policies, maybe they're not being followed, or at worst, they might be out of date or non-existent. And so that's one control weakness that we see. Lack of segregation of duties or separation of duties. There's 4 basic functions, and if you think about cash or checks, there's custody, that's the person who has it, right, who has the cash or the checks. There's authorization, that's the board's job, whoever's authorizing payments. The recording, that's when that's our function when we're putting it into the books, or if you have your own set of books, that's a recording function. Then there's reconciliation, that's whoever is doing the bank reconciliation, making sure that the cash ties out at the end of each month. And so sometimes in a lot of the districts, if there's not a lot of resources for the district, you might have one manager. I'm pretty sure, how many of you you're the manager and that's it? Okay, there's quite a few. That's common. Now, this is considered a weakness in the controls, because when one person does everything, there's more opportunity for errors or fraud, because there's one person doing that, and they can, if they're that type of person, they can take advantage of the system. So that is a weakness. But the third point is what we can do to mitigate that risk, and that is provide oversight. And so another common control weakness is a lack of oversight by the board. If you're on the board, that is your duty to make sure that you're looking into the finances, make sure that you're looking into and asking questions, and it's the law requires that you authorize every expense, so make sure that you're looking into that. And so, like, the example would be just the board members aren't really involved in the management of the district, or in the nuts and bolts of the business of the district. And finally, personnel issues. I can't highlight this one enough. You may have seen things in the news about certain districts and this is always the common thread, is the personnel issues. Like I say here, it's limited financial resources often inhibit the retention of competent personnel, or One common thread is that you might see someone living beyond their means. If the manager's, driving a Bentley and making minimum wage, it might cause you to question things and say, where's all that money coming from? Is it coming from your district? It's just some of those simple questions, and it doesn't take a lot of sophistication or a high degree. Just simply looking into things, asking questions, making sure that you're in the know with what's going on in your district. Some of the effects of those poor controls, like I said, you see it in the news, and it's all too common, and that is that it becomes a loss of public trust. What I did was simply preparing for this, just Googled embezzlement special district California, and an array of stories and news lines came up, and I simply went through and read some of the stories, and I just wanted to highlight a few here. Like I said, one of the effects of those poor controls can be a loss of public trust. You're there for the public good and serving the public, and when something's awry in your district, you lose the trust. For example, in Indian Valley Community Service District back in 2014, the established policies were not followed by the general manager. Property taxes were understated, so revenue was understated, and they figured that about $600,000 was stolen. And so not only do you lose public trust, you also lose the public funds. Example, San Mateo Mosquito Control Abatement District in 2013, the grand jury found that the board collectively and the district manager, like I said, two sides of that coin there, shared responsibility for the lack of oversight which allowed the embezzlement to occur. The grand jury also found the manager did not follow normal employment vetting procedures when hiring the finance director who was accused of the embezzlement. And in that case, over $700,000 was embezzlement. A lot of times we read these stories, and it can kind of be even comical times where you're saying, oh, look what the person's doing with all the money. But it's not really funny, it's sad, because what that money is there for is, like I said, the public good. My wife's a nurse, so a lot of times, I said, you save lives, and say, oh, you're an accountant, you don't save lives. But if you think about it, when the accountant does their job, or the bookkeeper, or the manager, or the person who is charged with oversight does their job, it protects the money. And what does the money do if it's, say, it's a hospital or a community service district? That money is going into providing those essential services, and those essential services, when those are down, things aren't pretty. So, the effects of those controls can be devastating, and so that leads into the pretty basic solution, which I've kind of already given away, and that is, just in contrast to those poor controls, we want to have sound controls or strong controls. We want to make policies and procedures and keep them. Inspect and evaluate each step of the financial process and develop a set of written procedures. When possible, separate the duties. If you do have enough money to have a manager and a bookkeeper or a part-time bookkeeper, great. Separate some of those duties so that there's some accountability between those individuals. The board must be engaged in the business. I think the fact that you're here shows already that you're interested in doing a good job. And that's half the story, right? But the other half is getting involved in making sure that you know what's going on in the day-to-day business of your district. One idea we have is, instead of having the bank statements mailed right to the office where the manager's always is and the board often isn't, have the bank statements sent to the board if you think something's up, so that the board can see those bank statements without any kind of story going along with them. That's just one idea, though. There can be many applications of this principle, but like I said, it's primarily just looking into things, asking questions, and being involved. And finally, look for potential personnel issues. Perform background checks and follow up on references before you hire someone. And like I said, look for those red flags, namely, person living beyond their means. So in review, like I said, our reports we went over the forms that our office requires. Our reports are also available online if you need them, or you can contact our office and we'll make sure we get you those. Remember to file your CPA audit with us as often as you get one within that year after the year's books close. Make sure you get board authorization for all your expenditures. Watch your budget, watch your cash. Make sure you have adequate authority and the ability to pay. If you're on the board, look into the goings-on of your district. Check the bank statements every month. Periodically review your policies and procedures and make sure they're being followed. And with that, that's all I have. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Could you tell, could you stand up, please?
yes. What kind of training do you have for office managers? Do you ever offer any training?
In addition to this training
Yes.
for office managers, we're not offering any currently. Like Supervisor Vanderpool said, there are past years which have other subject areas covered, and so I would avail myself of those resources. These videos are online. Other than that, there's private seminars that you could pay for, but these are the ones that the county is currently offering.
So online videos would be the thing.
I would go there. I send people there all the time from the districts who call and say, go ahead and avail yourself of those resources, watch those videos. And there's a lot of resources, hours of material already on there.
Do you have that here in the booklet? or
The
online?
website, I'm not sure. It's, if you Google Tulare County Government 10, Board of Supervisors website, but even if you Google Tulare County Government 101, you'll find it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
For the auditing, the annual auditing report, is that a CPA required to create that report?
Yes, a CPA, independent CPA firm would do that annual audit.
Okay, and if you are a small district, my understanding is that you could do it every other year?
There is a new law that if you're a small district under $150,000 in receipts, you can apply, and then the board here would have to approve it, and then you could do a compilation, which is smaller in scope than an audit. An audit is, the CPA is doing more work and looking at more, in a compilation is smaller, and then our office would have to do the internal control review. So if you wanted to, you can contact our office and we can talk more about that, if that's something you think you.
And who do I contact?
You can call and ask for myself. I can give my card after, and we'll get you to the right person.
Okay, super, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the difference between the bookkeeping district and a non-bookkeeping district? We've identified as a non-bookkeeping district.
Yeah, for a lot of years, the question was, what's the difference between non-bookkeeping and a bookkeeping district? For a lot of years, our office has made a delineation. The bookkeeping was a little more services that we did for the district, and we charged them more. Non-bookkeeping, we didn't charge, and it was, we gave you just a few accounts to use. Some of the bookkeeping districts would do most of them would do their payroll with us. Generally, they're the smaller districts, but that's it in a nutshell.
So is the bookkeeping service still available?
Yes.
And the fee of,
Well, we don't have, we're still working on the fee structure right now. We're going to have that out shortly, and we're going to be hopefully sending it out to you all and revising that because it is outdated. We want to make sure that we are consistent and that it's up to date. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned financial audits. I know those are required, but the internal control audit?
Internal control is just a portion of the financial audit. If you're already receiving an audit, you know how the front of the report will have the auditor's opinion.
Okay.
Then at the back, you'll have the internal control review. That's already a component of the audit. Yes, sir.
How does this district rate in terms of reliability? Do you have many people that transfer?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
On a scale of 1 to 10, would you say this district was a 10, or would you say it was a 1?
Which district?
This district that we're talking about, the one you administer.
Tulare County, reliability of Tulare County as a district, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
I mean, how many districts do you have a problem with?
You mean
It's few and far between. I'm talking over the years, we've seen, one every other year or so, it seems. We have problems with, we see, things come up and sometimes there's embezzlement. We've seen that over the years, but it's not pervasive. But then again, we only know what it usually ends up hitting the papers. We know pretty much the same thing as you. So, what we're trying to do is be proactive, and the number one deterrent of any of those kind of errors or fraud is the education. And so, just knowing about it and talking about it is a large deterrent, and it's also a great way to detect it. Because if you start talking about things, you start finding out what's going on, and if there is anything going wrong, then you can get cleaned up. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, we're sort of reasonably good.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, that's all I have. I'd like to also now introduce Michelle Baldwin. She's in charge of the Registrar of Voters Office, and I believe her bio is also in there too, so you can read over that as she comes up here. Thank you.
Sorry, they're going to have to get my slideshow going here. It's on this, I thought it was on my link, but I guess it has to be uploaded separately. As Paul indicated, I am Michelle Baldwin, the Registrar of Voters. The Registrar of Voters provides citizens the ability to exercise their constitutional right to vote. Over the years, we have seen an increase in election observers at our polling sites and offices. Therefore, we must strive to improve our processes and procedures continually so that the citizens are reassured that the integrity of the election process is upheld. I'm going to be talking about the election requirements of the district. Elections Code 10509 requires special districts to provide specific information related to districts in order to be placed on the ballot. The Register of Voters will be sending out district packages in April for the election to be held in November. Most of you already know it used to be in 2017, but everybody has gone to the 2018 election, so it'll be a big election this year. Even if your district has historically had its board members appointed by the Board of Supervisors, the documents are still required and need to be submitted to the Register of Voters office as follows. We need the incumbent verification, a resolution, a candidate filing notice, and a district map. This information will be due back in our office by July 3rd, 2018, so please make sure that you are diligent in completing the paperwork and returning it to us in a timely manner. Unfortunately, there are some districts who do not get them to us by the due date or not at all, so we would appreciate your cooperation. Incumbent verification. Please complete and review the Notice to County Register of Voters form with the attached list of incumbents for accuracy and make any corrections on the appointed board member director information sheet. This would also include adding anyone who the board appointed during an unexpected vacancy. And as being the former clerk of the board, it's also important that you notify the clerk of the board's office whenever you make any appointments due to an unexpected vacancy, because they also have rosters that they keep updated that help them when they have to make the appointments in lieu of election as well. So So notify the elections department and the clerk of the board of any appointments that you make throughout the year. Additionally, vacancies do not go into extension whether someone comes in and files or not. The resolution. The resolution needs to be adopted by the district board members and submitted to the Register of Voters office requesting and consenting to the consolidation of the election to render specific services to the district related to the election. It should also include language required by Elections Code 10520 that the district will reimburse the county for the actual costs incurred by the county elections official for conducting the election for the district. Additionally, we will need to have the district identify a newspaper of general circulation that they want the notice of election to be published in. This information is often left blank, and then we have to call to get the information. So staff would really appreciate it if you guys would fill that in when you do submit the resolution to our office. Candidate filing notice. This is an informational notice you can use to distribute to your board members or the public as a reminder of the filing period and how to get to the Register of Voters office to file nomination paperwork. We offer candidates an option of making an appointment with our office so that we can prepare their paperwork in advance and be ready when they arrive. Appointments can be made on our website, and it's just if you go to Tulare County and then go to the Elections Department, you'll find our website there by completing the candidate information sheet. Candidates must also file a completed Form 700 Statement of Economic Interest form when filing their nomination paperwork. District map verification. This request is extremely important because this verifies the boundaries and determines the area which dictates the ballot a voter would receive. Please carefully review the map provided by the Register of Voters for accuracy. Provide an updated map if the district boundaries were changed since the last election. Why this is important? In 2016, a portion of the county was annexed into the city of Porterville, and our office was not made aware of this change. Staff had to revise and reprint special ballots after the ballots had been created, and then they had to mail them out during a very busy time of the year, which created extra work for us. In addition, the district had to pay for all of that extra postage and mailing out of the new ballot. So you want to make sure that you look at that map and verify those district boundaries.
Where can you find the map?
We send it to you. So we send you a copy. I'm not sure how you would verify it in your district, but we send you a copy of what we have on file from previous elections.
Okay, so the previous one, who did that? In other words, the map that you have for our district
Was provided by you guys. It was something that you submitted to us identifying the district boundaries. You can check with LAFCO. They may have the maps for there as well, but we don't provide or create those maps for you. That's not something that we do, but you can check with LAFCO.
Those maps are online.
They're online? Okay, so the gentleman said that they're online. Okay, so information to assist the candidates, the candidates guide. The candidates guide provides important information to assist the candidate through an election process as follows. Declaration of candidacy and nomination petition filing period, semi-annual campaign statement due dates, last due dates for candidates to file nomination papers, candidates to withdraw their nomination papers candidacy, and candidates to file a candidate statement. Public inspection of candidate statements, random alphabet drawing for placement of candidates' names on the ballot, filing period for writing candidacy, period to receive vote-by-mail ballot requests, last day for voters to register to vote, last day to receive a voter's application for a vote-by-mail ballot to be mailed, date to begin processing vote-by-mail ballots for counting, and late condition vote-by-mail period. Candidate filing requirements. There will be different requirements for special districts, but most of the following prompts will apply. The Form 700 Statement of Economic Interest form needs to be filed whenever you file your candidate information. Form 501, candidate intention statement. Form 410, statement of organization recipient committee. Form 460, office holder and candidate campaign statement. And Form 470, office holder and candidate campaign statement, short form. Declaration of candidacy, candidate statement, qualifications to run for office, restrictions on government employees running for office, and restrictions on running for more than one office. Campaign laws and regulations. There are state, county, city, and gas company rules and regulations for placing of temporary political signs. Some general rules that apply are as follows. Don't post signs earlier than 90 days before the election. Remove signs no later than 10 days after the election. And don't post signs in the right-of-way on telephone poles or near gas lines. You can contact the state, county, city, and gas company to obtain a complete set of their rules regarding the posting of political signs. Services and resources available. Under California law, the Register of Voters is allowed to provide registered voter information at a cost to any candidate for federal, state, or local office and any person for election. The following services and resources are available to you in campaigning. Printed reports, statement of vote, computer printed reports or lists, precinct index, labels, vote by mail and mail precinct information. Electronic files, voter file extract, statement of vote, election data extracts, and precinct maps. Confidential voter data. Before the Register of Voters office can publicly disclose confidential voter information to a requester, the requester must complete and sign under penalty of perjury an application for voter registration information form and include the following: requester's driver's license, state identification card, or other identification approved by the Secretary of State. Payment for the cost of the file and data, and then the voter data information can only be used for campaign purposes. Misuse may result in fines. Registering voters. You can register voters. Last day to register is always 15 days before the election. Registration cards must be delivered to the Register of Voters office within 3 days. Obtain registration forms from the Register of Voters office. That completes my PowerPoint presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Yes?
My name is Bill Flinsard. I'm told you charge us a couple $100, maybe a little more, when we don't have an election. And apparently you charge this same money to every district regardless of size or population of registered voters. Is that true?
So we charge, you're saying, I think what I understand you saying is, if you are supposed to be on the ballot for an election and you have nobody running for that election, we still are going to charge you because there might be the possibility of somebody pulling papers and running for that election. So we're charging you for the
So we get charged for not having an election.
well, we would be conducting an election if you had people pull papers
And if they don't pull papers, we're charged anyway.
for the
And
for
we're
the
charged-
setup process
And
of it.
every district gets the same fee?
Not every district gets the same fee. It depends on the size of the district, but yes.
I was told that this was one where they checked the maps and checked the people.
Right, for the size of the district.
And the same fee was charged to every district. $241 sticks in my head.
I don't believe that's true because you're only charged for the actual cost, so it would depend on how many people are in the district.
So we're 15 acres.
So if your district was smaller than another district, we're charging you for the amount of ballots that we're printing for that district. So you're not going to incur
Even though
the
we're not
cost.
having an election.
That's if you were having an election. If you're not having an election, we wouldn't charge for that fee. But there is a setup fee that is initially charged for every district.
I understand. And how much is that setup fee?
I don't have the approximate cost.
Is it the same for every district?
If they're not having an election, it would be the same. But if they were having an election, the cost would be different.
My question is, if the districts are different in size and population, why is the fee the same?
For the setup fee, if there's not an election, it's the same, but the fee would be different if it was on the ballot and there was an election.
Okay. I was just astonished to get billed for not having something.
But it's only for the
I was afraid
setup
I
fee.
wasn't gonna have something else and you were gonna bill me for that.
You know, I do believe the elections can do their own election, right? They don't have to go through our office. We do? Okay, never mind. Any other questions? Okay. All right.
I took a bite of my dinner just as she was coming up. So I will finish chewing. In the meantime, I think this would be a good time for everyone to stand up and stretch while Diana's coming in. Look around, wake up a little bit, although hearing all the horror stories about how people can behave badly is a good way to stay awake. Okay, that was your stretch. So, we want to take a little bit, take a couple of minutes. We have some folks taking a little break, so we'll take 5. Avoiding sexual harassment, we've all seen this fall a number of bad examples of people behaving badly when it comes to this kind of thing. Fortunately, none of them are on special district governing boards in California that we know of, but it's certainly good to have this training. And this is not included in the certificate that you picked up when you came in. So one very important item for the board members is to make sure that you pick up the certificate for this part of it after the training. And because we won't hand that out until after it's over. And so make sure you hang on to that and turn a copy into your district so that when members of the public come by and want to know if you've gotten the training, and they can give us copies of that separate certification. And so it is a 2-hour thing, and we will take a break in the middle of this. So with that, I'll turn over to Diana.
Thank you, Barb. Good evening, everyone. My name is Diana Mendez. I'm an attorney with the Office of the County Counsel, and I am here to talk to you about prevention of workplace harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. So on today's agenda, we're going to talk about some laws, policies, regulations governing harassment, discrimination, and retaliation, liability for unlawful conduct, identifying harassment, discrimination, and retaliation, some best practices for you to take back to your districts. We'll go over some statistics and available remedies for victims of harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. So why are we giving this training? This is the first time we've given this training in Government 101. And as Barb said, there's a new law. It applies to local agencies that provide any type of compensation, salary, or stipend to a local agency official of that agency. And local agencies include counties and special districts. It requires training regarding harassment, discrimination, and retaliation for 2 hours every 2 years. 2 hours every 2 years. So make sure you get your certificate, as Barb said. Otherwise, you'll have to come back before the 2 years are up, and we'll get to do this all over again. So this is a recently passed law. Why do you think this law was passed for special districts? What do you think? Has sexual harassment been an issue in the media lately? Yeah? Yeah, you can't turn on the news without hearing the Me Too movement, or another producer, director, politician, somebody, right, engaging in sexual harassment against employees or just anyone in general. So I think here the legislature thought, it's really important we let our special districts know what is not permitted, give you some ideas, some skills, some best practices for you to take back to your special districts and, tell your employees about once you get back. So Barb is going to be giving us a presentation on a little Jeopardy game later. And without wanting, I apparently have put a little Wheel of Fortune in your packets. The next slide is a little bubble. And I think the ones that printed for you have little squares, right? So we could Wheel of Fortune this and say, okay, it's a policy. What do you think? Throw some letters out, but that would take way too long. So here's what's supposed to be in that little bubble. Local agencies must provide an environment free from harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. Why do you think that is? Why do you have to provide an environment free from harassment, discrimination, and retaliation?
Because you want them to do their job.
Because you want them to do their job.
And if they feel stressed or harassed,
If they feel stressed or harassed, they're not going to do a good job, right? That's an excellent answer. Yeah, you want productive employees, productive people in your district, so you want to provide an environment where they want to show up every day, right? Or whatever their schedule may be. What else do you think?
It's the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do, and I would 100% agree with that. It's the right thing to do. As a lawyer, what do you think my favorite answer is to this?
To avoid lawsuits.
To avoid lawsuits, exactly. To avoid lawsuits. You want to avoid lawsuits, it's the law, right? So that's why you want to be providing an environment free from harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. A lot of agencies have a zero tolerance policy on these types of behaviors, right? So you want to make sure everybody knows that it's not permitted. So some laws, regulations, and policies. We have federal laws, we have state laws, we have California laws, we have some agency laws, all laws made to protect employees, right? In general, that's what they're made for. They're made to protect employees. They're made to also, in a sense, protect the public when they come into contact with, an employee at the special district, an elected official. They're all made to protect us. When you were picking up the packets back there was a handout that gave summaries of these laws, so you can, read them in a little more detail. We won't go over every single one of these. The one we highlight is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. That prohibits discrimination by employers on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. So, that encompasses a lot of people, right? And then if we look at California, California is a state that is very employee friendly. So California looks at what the federal laws give us and expands on it and says, federal laws protect us under these certain classes. We're going to add some more. We really want to protect our employees. So the one we focus on there is the Fair Employment and Housing Act, otherwise known as FEHA. And the Federal Employment and Housing Act is enforced by the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. And I'm sure most of you have probably heard of the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, otherwise known as DFEH. And that prohibits discrimination based on race, color, religion, national origin, or ancestry, physical disability, mental disability, medical condition, marital status, sex, sexual orientation, age, pregnancy, childbirth. Right? A lot more protections than what Title VII gives us. And then we also have some whistleblower and anti-retaliation laws. Now we call these the "don't get back at me" statutes. These protect employers or anyone who reports an unlawful activity. right? So if I were to report that my boss is sexually harassing me, I can't suffer an adverse employment action because I reported that, right? Because I reported that. If there's something else going on, some sort of employment issue separate and apart for that, you keep them on separate tracks. But I can't suffer an adverse employment action because I reported something. So these whistleblower and anti-retaliation laws, again, protect all of us. Why do you think we have these types of laws? Why do we have the don't get back at me laws?
Take the fear out.
To take the fear out, right? Otherwise, either you were going to get fired if you reported something. Were you going to report it? Are you going to report it? Probably not, right? Probably not. So we don't want to deter people from reporting unlawful activities. So that's why we have these. And then I already mentioned DFEH, but these are the administrative agencies that do a lot of the investigations and enforce a lot of these laws. Federally, we have the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC. It's the federal agency that administers Title VII, the ADA, and other laws. And then in California, we have what I already mentioned, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. That's sort of the state equivalent of the EEOC. So it administers the FEHA employment discrimination laws and retaliation. So further in the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about, how people can file a complaint and what they can do after they file a complaint and get a response. And then we have our policies. How many of your special districts have a sexual harassment or discrimination policy that you know of? Okay, a few of you do, great. The rest of you, maybe we want to get on that, right? Maybe we want to get on that and make sure everyone understands zero tolerance on sexual harassment, discrimination, retaliation, right? Tulare County has, as an employer, has a Personnel Rule 14. It's our harassment discrimination policy. So what Tulare County does is they pass out a copy of that policy to every employee every year. And they expect that employee to sign that policy so they know, so they're reminded, friendly reminder, sexual harassment, zero tolerance. Right, so that's something you may want to think about doing as well, right? Passing out that policy, making sure people read it and understand it. Because it's really going to do you no good if this policy's been in some employee handbook that's, on a shelf somewhere collecting dust that no one really ever reads, right? So make sure your employees and, as you as board members know what the policies are. And we, a lot of times, and I think if you do, if you don't have a policy, or if you do have a policy, read your policy and see, okay, what does our policy say is prohibited, right? Because the way we try to write our sexual harassment discrimination policies is that it makes certain behavior, it prohibits certain behavior. Under our policy, it would be a violation of our policy, but under the law, it doesn't necessarily violate the law, if that makes sense, right? It'll violate our policy, but it doesn't necessarily violate the law. Why do you think that is? What do you think? Why do we want to make our internal policy stricter than what the law says is sexual harassment?
So it doesn't get to the court.
So it doesn't get to the point of it being unlawful, right? You want to be able to intervene before it gets to the point of being unlawful. Right, so that's something to think about. Some liability and damages. The standard of accountability when we're looking at sexual harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. The standard, an employer is liable if the employer or supervisor knew or should have known about supervisor and or peer-to-peer harassment and failed to take immediate and appropriate corrective action. So what does that mean? What does knew or should have known mean?
stood by and did nothing, saw.
You saw it, right? If you see something, do you fall under knew or should have known?
Yeah.
If you witness it, right? Yeah. If somebody tells you something, right? If they come to you and tell you something, if somebody sends you a text, somebody sends you an email, right? It's that you've been put on notice, right? We don't expect people to be mind readers. If there's really no way anybody could have known, that's a mitigating circumstance. But we're really looking for notice, right? Did you know or should have you known? There was a case where an employee texted his supervisor, letting the supervisor know, I'm being sexually harassed, I need your help. The text was sent on a weekend while both employees, were off, they weren't at work. So what do you think that supervisor did? What would you do? Right, are you on notice? Does it matter if it's the weekend and you're not on duty? No? Does it matter if it was sent to your personal phone and not your, official phone? No, right? No, it doesn't matter. Unfortunately for that case, that supervisor did nothing, said, I'm off duty, it's my personal phone, so, I'm not on notice, I'm not officially on notice. Right, so you have to be smart about it. And I'm glad to hear most of you said yes, that should have been reported. So let's go, true or false question here. I can be held personally liable for harassing my coworkers or employees. What do you think? True. Right, the agency is not the only one liable. A supervisor may be held personally liable for his or her conduct, failure to report, or failure to take immediate and appropriate corrective action. A non-supervisor can also be liable for engaging in such conduct. So when we say personally liable, what does that mean?
Responsible.
What's that?
Personally responsible.
Personally responsible.
You can be sued too. With the company, you can be sued individually.
So the answer over here was you can be sued individually as well, not just the company, but you as an individual. That is correct, right? They will try to attach any damages awarded to them to your personal assets. We're talking about your house, your car, your kid's college fund, whatever that may be, right? So that's really what personally liable means, and we don't want to see anybody get into that situation, right, where they're found to be personally liable. There was a local case here having to do with Tacoma's Bank. Is everyone familiar with Tacoma's Bank? It's a published case where an employee had requested time off to get breast cancer treatment. She was going through breast cancer treatment and she requested time off. And the bank said, oh, we need you at work, so no time off for you. So she filed a lawsuit. She said she was, I think she filed it under disability discrimination and also violation of some medical leave laws. Right? And there she personally sued the supervisor and I think the CEO as well, because they were both involved in making the decision where she wasn't giving her time off. And what do you think happened there? You think they were found personally liable? Yeah, they sure were. So I want to say the bank was found liable for like $1.2 million. The supervisor was found liable, I think it was like for $90,000, but then they settled for like $7,000, which is still a lot of money, right? I mean, I don't want to have to pay out $7,000 from my own pocket, right? So we want to make sure if we witness any sort of discrimination, harassment, or retaliation first of all, we want to make sure we're not the ones partaking in it, right? Secondly, we want to make sure if we witness it or if we're put on notice that it's happening, we do something about it, right? We do something about it. So, and depending on your agency, that could mean different things. Are you the ones that are supposed to take some sort of action? Or are you supposed to report it to somebody? Find out what your role is. For me, I have to report it to my supervisor, right? And because I don't have the ability to, or the authority, I should say, to start an investigation, right? That goes above my pay grade. So I would make sure to report it to my supervisor. And then if, I don't hear anything or see anything, I don't necessarily get to know what's going on. But I'm going to follow up with my supervisor to make sure something is happening, right? Hey boss, you remember I reported this to you? I just want to make sure that's being taken care of, right? So you're, you get a little more certainty in that some sort of corrective action is taking place. So who is liable? Employers are liable for the conduct of supervisors who engage in unlawful harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. Supervisors may also be liable for engaging in harassment, discrimination, or retaliation. And all employees can be individually liable for engaging in unlawful harassment. And we'll talk about this a little more, but the difference between, discrimination and harassment. For discrimination, you have to have some sort of adverse employment action for it to be considered discrimination, right? So I wasn't promoted because I'm of a different religion than my boss, right? Or I wasn't promoted because I'm female, right? So I wasn't promoted because of something, right? The adverse employment action is I wasn't promoted. For harassment, there needs to be no adverse employment action, right? There needs to be, it's just this, I'll call it obnoxious behavior towards you, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So that's one of the biggest differences between discrimination and harassment here. So a peer has no influence over your employment actions, right? A peer doesn't write your performance evaluations. A peer doesn't determine if you're going to get promoted or not, right? But a supervisor does. The supervisor does have that influence, so that's something to think about. And what are damages available to victims of harassment, discrimination, and retaliation? We have past and future medical and psychiatric expenses, past and future wage loss, damages for emotional distress, punitive damages, and attorney's fees. So, sometimes you may be listening to the news, and you hear about these outrageous sums, right, from lawsuits. It gives us attorneys bad names sometimes, but it is what it is. But where we see those really high numbers, those come usually from punitive damages and attorney's fees. Because past and future medical, past and future wage loss, we can kind of figure out what that's going to be, right? Let's say past and future wage loss. I have missed 2 weeks of work because, I was harassed, so I had to take time off of work. I missed 2 weeks of work. And now I'm going to miss an additional 3 weeks. Can you figure out what my wages are going to be in those 5 weeks? You can, right? We can figure out what that is. For punitive damages are, what it says there in the parentheses, they're punishment damages. It's the court saying, hey employer, hey special district, the conduct that was going on was so egregious, it was so bad, on top of what we already figured out the wage loss is, on top of what we already figured out what the medical expenses are, we're going to add this penalty, we're going to add this punishment damage. That could be any damage, any amount. It could be $5,000, it could be $1, it could be $1 million, right? We don't necessarily know what that's going to be. So that's sometimes where we hear those really high numbers. Those a lot of times come from those punitive damages. Attorney's fees are also very high, you know. And a plaintiff only has to win on one claim to get all their attorney's fees paid for them. A case I like to use to illustrate that has to do with UPS. Is everyone familiar with UPS, the delivery service, right? You probably saw them a lot on the roads a lot around the holidays. One of their employees filed a lawsuit, a discrimination lawsuit, and he filed it based on every single protected class he could fit himself into. It was one of those, you know, the kitchen sink types of lawsuits. So he claimed discrimination based on gender, based on age, based on religion, based on marital status, I think. I mean, just anything he could fit himself into, he filed his lawsuit. He was successful on one claim. Out of all the claims, he was successful on one claim. So he was awarded $27,000. You know, it's a lot of money, but for UPS, maybe not a lot. The attorney's fees for that case were $700,000. So what did UPS have to do? They had to pay the $700,000 because the court doesn't prorate the attorney's fees based on how many claims you have success on. All you need to do is be successful on one claim, and you get all the attorney's fees paid. So these cases can be very, very expensive for your agencies, right? So that's why it's really important that we prevent this type of behavior from happening in our agencies. So let's talk about what is unlawful discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. So what is discrimination? It's adverse treatment or consideration based on a protected class or characteristics. And when we say treatment or consideration, we mean, did you do something or fail to do something? Right, did you do something or fail to do something because you were considering, the protected class, right? Did I not get promoted because of my religion? Did I not get promoted because I'm female, right? Did I not get hired because I have a disability, right? It not only applies for people that are already working there, for current employees, it also applies for applicants. It applies to applicants as well. So we have to think about that. If you're hiring, you have to think about that. A lot of times we get into issues when we think about, stereotypes, right? Stereotypes. So say you're looking to hire someone to be the receptionist, to answer phones. And you're looking at the application, and the name on the application looks foreign. Say it has 20 letters, and you can't pronounce the name. So you're thinking, well, I think this person might be foreign. I'm not sure if they could really speak English, or maybe they have an accent. So let's not call them in. Let's not call them in, and we'll pass them, and we'll go on to the next person. Would that be considered discrimination? Absolutely, right? Yeah, that would be discrimination. So, that's sometimes where we get into these pitfalls is, with stereotypes, it comes up a lot. So when I'm talking about protected classes or characteristics, what are those? So there's a wide array of protected classes and characteristics. Let's see. We're talking about race, color, national origin or ancestry, religion or religious creed, sex/gender, and that includes now gender identity, gender expression, persons that are transgender, pregnancy is a protected class, sexual orientation, age over 40, I don't know why 40 is the magic number. You know, I think maybe, you know, when these laws were written, people didn't work as long as they do now, and, you know, maybe people didn't live as long as they do now, I'm not sure, but for those of us that are not 40 yet, you know, 40 is not over the hill, 40 is, hey, we get another protected class, so it's good news. Do you have a question?
I do. It's about the medical condition. Like, what if somebody goes off and gets into an accident?
Uh-huh.
And they're laid up for a while, they're still employed because they have, you know, the sick leave. But when they come back, they can't do the job that they were hired to do. Is that discrimination based on medical condition?
So the question is, you have an employee who got in a car accident, they took time off, you know, to heal, and when they come back, they can't do the job they were originally doing. If you let them go, is that what you're saying? Is that discrimination? What do we think? How would we handle it?
Reasonable accommodation.
Reasonable accommodation. Ding, ding, ding. Yeah, we have to, in that situation, do what's called, and this is kind of getting outside the scope of this training, but I'll try to quickly go over it. You have what's called an interactive process meeting, where you meet with the person. That person's probably going to have some work restrictions from their doctor, and then you see if you can accommodate those restrictions. You know, if you can, great. You know, and you just accommodate. If the person, for example, you know, can't type very fast because of the accident, is there a way you can accommodate that? You know, is there software that may help them, right? Maybe a different keyboard could help them. So you look at all those options. If you can't accommodate, depending on the agency, you know, for example, in the county, we would have to see if the person is eligible for retirement. We would have to see if we could retire them out, right, of that position. So there could be a lot of different avenues if they're not able to do the job with or without an accommodation. So it's not necessarily discrimination if you go through all the legal steps. Right? Does that answer your question?
But like what we did based on legal counsel was they just renamed the position, so we don't have it anymore.
They just renamed the position and said we don't have it anymore. Yeah, I'd like to hear that. You know? Yeah, I mean, sometimes you know.
I think that's what they did, is they did the same that, but that position is no longer open.
Yeah, so, you know, in that case, there have to be probably just a lot of looking into what exactly happened behind the scenes of that. So, okay, so back to our protected classes or characteristics, you know, age, marital status, you know, you're married or you're not married, there's none of this Facebook, it's complicated, you know, that's not a protected class. Physical disability, mental disability, medical condition, genetic information, military or veteran status, and engaging in a protected activity. Engaging in a protected activity was kind of like what I was talking about with the whistleblowing. You know, you bring forward something that is unlawful, or you help someone if they're suing the agency, you serve as a witness for them. You know, those all count as protected activities. So the elements of discrimination.
Wait.
Yes.
One more. Perceived as.
What's that? Oh, perceived as. Thank you. I didn't see that up there. Yeah, perceived as. So what does perceived as mean? You know, it means that people treat you as though, and we'll take one of these for example. Let's take,
You look gay, so they're going to perceive you as gay?
what's that?
Like if you look like you're gay, they're going to perceive you as gay?
Yeah, no, that's if you, if you look, you know, if you look like you're gay and they perceive you as gay, is that perceived, you know, does that fall under protected class or characteristic? It does, right? If you are not gay, but people, you know, treat you differently because they think you are, that is protected. So for like, let's say a mental disability. Somebody thinks you have a mental disability, so they treat you differently because they think you have that mental disability, even though you don't, that would be discrimination, right? So it's the perceived. Okay, so the elements of discrimination. We're talking about the employee belonging to a protected class. So any of those we just mentioned. The employee is qualified for the job. They are subjected to an adverse employment action. And similarly situated employees receive more favorable treatment. So what is an adverse employment action? I already said, I use the fail to promote example. But we're talking about any action with material effect on employment taken within the course and scope of employment. It includes actions which impact your job performance. It could impact your opportunity for advancement. So what are some other examples of adverse employment actions? So failure to promote, right? I've already used that one. What else? What do you think? What's the ultimate adverse employment action?
Fired.
Getting fired, right? That's an adverse employment action. What else? What do you think?
Loss of hours.
Loss of hours. Yep, that could be an adverse employment action. Yeah, denial of employment. Remember I said this also covers applicants. Denial of employment could be an adverse employment action. A poor evaluation, right? And all these adverse employment actions are based on your protected class or characteristic, right? I'm giving you less hours because you're over 40 years old. I'm giving you less hours because you have medical disability, right? They all have to be based on a protected class or characteristic. So let's go over the scenario. All right, so Hani is Muslim and has interviewed for the position of construction maintenance worker. She meets the minimum qualifications for the job. She insists she be permitted to wear a hijab while at work if she is selected for the position. A hijab is a cloth that covers the head and chest of the wearer. Although she is a top candidate for the job, the supervisor is not sure whether he should allow her to wear a hijab while on duty because it violates the uniform policy and all workers are required to wear a hard hat while on duty. So, let's have a group discussion. You're a supervisor in this situation. What factors or questions should you consider in determining whether to hire Hani?
If she could wear a hat over her.
If she could wear a hat over her hijab, okay? What's the big issue here? Why are you thinking about that? Safety, right? Safety's a big issue. So we have safety, and we have a uniform policy, right, that we're looking at. So could she wear the hard hat over the hijab? What else? Is that the only concern, the hard hat over the hijab, or is there other safety concerns?
Yeah, other
She
safety
would be
concerns.
treated.
How she would be treated? What do you mean?
Well, what she's wearing clearly states what her religion is, and being that the situation is the way it is right now.
Okay, so here it's stated with her wearing her hijab, it clearly states what her religion is, and with the situation what it is being now, that would be an issue. If we took that into consideration, would we be in trouble on that?
That would be, yes, discrimination.
Right, that probably could be discrimination, right? Because, I mean, honestly, if she's the best candidate for the job, do we care about her religion? No.
If you have a policy that everyone has to wear a hat, you gotta follow your policy.
If we have a policy that everyone has to wear a hat, we have to follow the policy.
True, but then you've got to consider how the others are going to treat her, and whether she's going to be, say if she's a supervisor, would they listen to what she says?
You have to consider how others are going to treat her, and if she's a supervisor, do we think they're going to do what she says? Can we consider that?
The employees, the problem would be with the employees,
Then we would take that up with the other employees. Who would agree with that? yeah, you know, the issue there is not going to be, you know, because here we're consider, if we're going to consider how people are going to treat Hani because of her religion, we're discriminating against Hani, right? Because we're treating her differently because of her religion. If her subordinates, if her coworkers are treating her poorly because of her religion, then we're going to address that with the subordinates or with, you know, her coworkers, right? Because they're then violating probably, you know, if you have like a rude and discourteous policy, they may be discriminating against her. So that's what we're going to address, right? If Hani is a top candidate for the job, we don't care what her religion is, right? We just care, can she follow, as was said over here, can she follow the uniform policy, right? Because we have safety concerns. Now, does anyone else want to chime in on this? All right. So, you know, the factors we're considering are, could she wear the hard hat over the hijab, right? We want to also consider if it's like a scarf type of cloth, we want to make sure that's not going to get caught in material, in machines, right? Because we're talking about construction maintenance worker. So we want to make sure that's also addressed. And is there a reasonable alternative to wearing the hijab, right? Is there? Do we know? We don't know, right? So we're going to have to address that. So question 2 says, if passed over the position, could Hani state a claim for discrimination? Sure she can, right? Sure she can. Anybody can state a claim for discrimination, right? The thing is she going to be successful in her claim of discrimination? Well, that kind of bleeds into question 3. What should the supervisor do if there is no reasonable accommodation that could be made regarding the uniform policy? So, what would be the best way to address this?
Safety has to come first.
Safety has to come first. Are you going to make that decision on your own? You probably have to have a conversation with Hani, right? You have to have a conversation with her and let her know, hey, this is our uniform policy. You know, everyone is expected to follow the uniform policy. Are you able to follow it, right? Can you wear a hard hat, right? You know, if we're concerned with the looseness of the cloth, can she wear something over that to make sure the cloth isn't loose, right? So, you know, you do that usually with your HR. If you have questions, you know, you could also call your counsel to figure out how that could be best addressed, right? But if we just pass Hani over because, you know, her religion, right? That's when we're looking at a discrimination issue. So we don't want to do that. This case is actually based on a real case that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. It had to do with the retailer Abercrombie & Fitch. If not everyone's familiar with Abercrombie & Fitch, Abercrombie & Fitch is a clothing store. There's not one here in Tulare County. There's one in Fresno County at the Fashion Fair Mall. And they sell, their target audience is, you know, like high school and college students. And they sell a certain look. And I think they call that look like East Coast collegial prep or something along those lines. Yeah, it's very preppy. So there was a young girl named Hani who applied to work at the store. And the manager at that store hired her. And she was doing a really good job. You know, she was on the floor, you know, folding clothes, and she would be a cashier at times. So she was doing a really good job. The uniform policy for Abercrombie & Fitch stated you can't wear any sort of headgear. So you can't wear a cap, you can't wear a hat, you can't wear, you know, a scarf, you can't wear anything on your head. So when the district manager came to the store and saw that Hani was wearing, you know, her scarf, he said, hey, what's going on? She's not following the uniform policy. And the store manager said, well, you know, I assume it's because of her religion. I didn't ask her, but she's doing a really good job. So there's really no issue. And the District manager said, well, no, if she doesn't take that off, she can't work here because it's our uniform policy. So the case went, like I said, all the way up to the Supreme Court. And this was when Justice Scalia was still alive before he passed away. And it was a unanimous decision. All the justices voted the same. What do you think? Do you think they said, Abercrombie & Fitch, yes, you are discriminating, or no, you are not discriminating?
Yes.
Yes, you are discriminating. Why do you think they said that?
Because it didn't affect her job.
It didn't affect her job. What's the difference between the case I talked to you about and our scenario?
Safety.
Safety, right? There's actually a legitimate business reason for requiring the hard hat, right? We probably have some OSHA regulations, right, that require, either hard hats, steel-toe boots, or whatever it may be, right? And that's right. The Supreme Court said, well, Abercrombie & Fitch, there's really no legitimate business reason for you not to accommodate her religion. This was a religious accommodation. So yeah, they said yes, discrimination. So Abercrombie & Fitch had to, reconsider their dress code policy. So something else to remember is if you have these policies and you're applying it to one person but not the other, is that going to be an issue? Yes, right? You have to make sure the policies are applied to everybody equally. Right? If you're requiring Hani to wear the hard hat, you better make sure, Bob, Joe, and Maria over here are also wearing the hard hat. Right? And it's not just something you're imposing on Hani. So that's something else to remember. Okay. Any questions so far? Let's see, how are we on time? Okay. I think we're okay to keep going. All right, so our next topic is harassment. And what is harassment? It's verbal, visual, physical actions that are unwelcome and directed to or related to an employee's protected classification. It's important to remember that harassment is not within the course and scope of employment. Right? It includes actions by and towards employees, independent contractors, vendors, and other non-employees. Can you be liable for harassing the delivery person? What do you think? Yeah, right, you can. So yeah, you have to remember it includes not just people who work at the district, at your districts, but think about the public, right? Do you think you could be liable for harassing a member of the public while you're, your official duties? Yeah, probably, right? Probably. So it's not just against employees. So let's look at this next scenario. 3 office assistants speak both English and Spanish. Sometimes when they are on break with each other, they will speak in Spanish. A supervisor in the office often scolds them on their breaks, telling them to speak only in English when in the office. While on duty, other coworkers tease them and make comments, such as, "You always say words funny," or "What did you say? I can't understand you over that accent of yours." So just based on these facts, do you think there may be some harassment going on here? Maybe, maybe not. Well, let's see what the questions are asking us. So you're a supervisor. What are you going to do? What do you think? Is this something you're going to report? Possibly? Yeah, I think so. I think so. You're going to, depending on your role, you're going to investigate or, report the situation. What about the supervisor that's telling them that they have to speak English while on their breaks? What do you think? It's their free time?
Still need to report it.
What was that?
You need to report the supervisor.
You need to report to the supervisor? Or report the supervisor? Yeah, right. Or you may just want to speak to a supervisor and say, hey, they're on their breaks. They can speak whatever language they want
What if you're a member of the public and you're working?
What if you're a member of the public and you hear them while they're working? So you would report, so the member of the public reports that they're speaking a different language while they're working?
Well, maybe they understand what they're saying.
Maybe they understand what they're saying?
Comment.
So it depends on what they're saying, right? It could depend on what they're saying.
How do you know if you don't speak the language?
They don't know if they don't speak the language. So would it be a situation where they're just speaking amongst themselves in the office, or they're helping them in a different language knowing the person doesn't understand? You know, that I think we would have to weigh it that way.
If you can't understand them, they can't be offending you, right?
If you can't understand them, they can't be offending you. Not necessarily, right? There are a few words we know here and there we pick up in different languages.
Right.
Yeah, you know, generally, English only is not, you know, there's not a law that says English only. But we do look at whether there is an interference with being able to do the work, right? So if we just have, you know, 2 office assistants who are giving each other, you know, instructions in Spanish, you know, is that going to be harassment against somebody else? You know, not necessarily. I think we'd have to do, we need more facts on that. But if we have a situation where, say, we have 3 office assistants, and 2 of them speak a foreign language, and the other one doesn't. So when the 2 are speaking the foreign language, they're leaving the other one out, right, and not giving that office assistant the information that person needs to do their job, then that changes things, right? Then that changes things. So in that situation, you know, maybe you are able to enforce an English only rule, right? Because it's causing turmoil within the office space. But if we're just talking about, you know, people under break speaking a different language, you know, generally that's going to be okay. And then if we look at the last question, what if the office assistants are also teasing coworkers, gossiping and calling other coworkers names when they speak in Spanish? Does that protect you from, does gossiping in a different language protect you from, you know, any policies you may have? No, right? No. Yeah, if they're gossiping or calling other coworkers names when they speak in Spanish, that's not okay. So you want to address that, right? You want to address that with your policies. Oh, and number 2, I think I skipped. What would you recommend if the coworkers are actually having difficulty understanding the office assistants? Well, you know, there's a way of doing it with addressing it without being rude and discourteous, right? Maybe you could ask the office assistant to repeat what he or she said. If you don't understand, maybe you send them an email later and say, hey, I just wanted to clarify what you wanted me to do or what you said earlier because I didn't really grasp it. Right, what we're trying to get at is you don't have to harass somebody, right, to get the information you need. You just, you know, you find other ways that work that are not harassing or not rude and discourteous. Obvious. So questions on this scenario? All right. So, what do we have next? Gender and sexual orientation harassment and discrimination. This is actually a new requirement to the trainings. The legislature just passed a law this year that says, you know, counties, employers, whoever gives the sexual harassment prevention training, you know, you need to add a slide on gender and sexual orientation, harassment, and discrimination, and some examples of what harassment and discrimination might be. So these are some examples we have. A coworker or supervisor teases you, jokes, uses slurs, or threatens you because of your sexual orientation. Right? That is not permitted. You know, sexual orientation is a protected class. Or you're required to adhere to attire and grooming rules that apply to a gender with which you do not identify or express. And like we talked about in the Hani situation, here the employer would not be able to demonstrate business necessity. So now what you'll see is that most dress codes are gender neutral, right? So prior dress code might say, business casual or business attire means a suit and tie for a man and a dress for a woman, right? Now we don't differentiate between men and women. All we say our dress code is for business attire, a suit and tie, dress, and that's it. You don't differentiate between this is okay for men, this is okay for women, unless again you're able to demonstrate a business necessity. But I think those would be far and few between. Another example would be refusal to hire applicants because they're transgender. So if someone who is transgender applies to your district and you refuse to hire them because they are transgender, that is discrimination because transgender is a protected class. So questions on any of these? Clarifications needed? Okay. So, our next topic is going to be sexual harassment. So what is sexual harassment? It's a form of harassment based upon gender. It's unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature offensive to a reasonable person and to the recipient, and it's severe or pervasive. And what do we mean by severe or pervasive? Severe means seriousness, right? Pervasive means frequency. So we'll talk about that in a couple of slides, but let me start with the unwelcome conduct. So forms of unwelcome conduct usually are verbal, physical, or visual. Verbal, sounds, jokes, or attempts at humor, denigrating terms, personal questions, comments, certain compliments, foul or obscene language. Physical, we have touching or proximity, blocking, leering, gestures, forcing around, massage, hugs. Visual, we're talking about emails, cartoons, clothing, looking at breasts while talking, elevator eyes. Does everybody know what elevator eyes are? You look somebody up and down. So these can all be forms of sexual harassment. There was a case where a male employee was harassing his female coworker. So he had developed some sort of crush on her, and he would go and first he tried to seek her out on Facebook. She said, I don't want to be your friend on Facebook, we're coworkers, I don't want to be your friend. And he kept trying to friend her on Facebook, was how it first started. And then he would go look for her at work. And she sat, she had her desk and had a chair on her desk, at her desk. And so he would go and lean on the desk next to her chair so that his groin was kind of in her face area. He was very, very close to her. And then if she would try to leave, he would go and stand in the doorway because it was a narrow doorway. So she's trying to leave, what is she gonna have to do? Brush up against him, right? And if she was wearing, whatever clothing she was wearing, or, verbal says certain compliments. If she was wearing like a blazer or a cardigan sweater, and she was wearing a little, we ladies know them as cami shirts, a little tank top underneath, he would say things like, "Your blouse is so beautiful. Why don't you take your sweater off so we can just all admire your blouse?" Is that a compliment? Or is that creepy? What is it?
Creepy.
Creepy, right. So, he continued with this type of behavior. Luckily, that person reported him, and that agency, I think it was a public agency. That agency conducted an investigation. And while they were investigating, they asked him, why are you doing these things? And his response was, "I find the women in my life like to be treated this way." I find the women in my life like to be treated this way. What do you think about that comment? Creepy. What?
He's been around some strange women.
He's been around some strange women. Yeah, you know, we have to remember our boundaries, right? Boundaries. If maybe he treated his girlfriend like that, who wasn't his coworker, you know, that's, you know, to each their own. But you can't treat your coworker like that, right? You can't treat people in the workplace like that, right? So you have to remember, and here we're talking about, you know, your special districts. If you're an elected member of the special district, you don't treat your constituents like that. You know, don't treat the office manager like that. You know, don't treat the UPS delivery driver like that, right? You have to remember, you know, I like to tell my husband, like, know where you are, right? Know what's the situation here, right? If that's how you joke around with your brother or with your, you know, friends, that's different than if we're at a work function, right? They're boundaries, so remember that. Visual, I like to get on my little soapbox here when we're talking about emails, right? Emails. Are your special districts public agencies? They are, right? They're public agencies. So what is your email considered with a public agency? It's a public record, right? Your emails are public records. So if any member of the public, a member of the media, you know, just anyone who's bored on a Saturday night wants to request your emails, can they get those? What do you think? Yeah, generally they can, right? The Public Records Act has some exemptions. You know, one exemption is, for example, the attorney-client privilege. So if I send an email to one of my clients, you know, because my client is asking me for legal advice, and I'm providing that legal advice in an email, that email will be protected because of, you know, the attorney-client privilege. But if I'm emailing my coworker about how much I dislike somebody because of their physical disability, is that going to be protected just because I'm an attorney? It's not, right? It's not, because there's no exemption, there's no protection there. For you as a member of a special district, there are even less exemptions, right? So be very, 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 very cognizant and careful as to what you write on your emails. I like to tell my clients, if you would not like to see that email on the front page of the local newspaper, do not send that email. If you are angry about something, type up the email, but don't write anything in the little tube box, right? Take a walk. Have your coworker read the email, right? Have somebody else read the email to read it for tone, to read it for appropriateness. Question?
I work for a school district and we use Google.
Mm-hmm.
We've been told that Google saves those unsent versions and they can be accessed by the public.
So Google saves those unsaved versions and they can be accessed by the public.
So don't write that email.
So don't write that email. Write it on a piece of paper and tear it up, right? Yeah, you have to be careful. And another new regulation, new law, you know, a lot of us use our personal devices, right, to do county business or do agency business or whatever it may be. Just because it's sent on your personal device, if it's sent on from your personal email, it's not protected. If it has to do with the district's business and it was sent on your personal device from your personal email, we have a duty to look in there. You know, generally we would ask you to look in there and pull whatever emails are in there. If you get sued, if the agency gets sued and they ask, well, I know they sent something from their, Yahoo account, or from their AOL account. Someone's going to be appointed to go look in your emails and pull those, right? So just be very, very careful what you put in your emails, because those are public record.
And you only need to keep your emails for 30 days, is it? Was it?
You only need to keep your emails for 30 days. No. I mean, it depends on what your agency's retention policy is. It depends on what your district's retention policy
Oh, I
is.
thought you got it from the conference, from the Secretary's conference.
I'm not familiar with any law that says you only for 30 days. So, question back there.
Yeah, so if you have that policy and the email's automatically deleted within 30 days or however much the time frame is, does the law let the inquiring person look on your server for the old emails that are deleted?
So I heard part of it. Was the question, okay, so you have a policy where emails are purged every 30 days, right? So when you respond to whoever's asking for emails, if they want emails for the last 6 months, you tell them, we don't go that far back because our policy is to delete them after 30 days. Once they're gone, you can't, you don't have anything to provide. But if they're retained somewhere by, Joel was saying Google retains them, then, you're probably gonna have a duty to look for those. So, again, takeaway, be careful what you write in your emails. If you're having personnel issues, ask professional questions. Ask, something you wouldn't be embarrassed for, your grandma to read, So, all right, that's enough on the emails. So, the next blue bullet point there says change in the workplace. Was this an employee? Was this somebody in your district that was just doing an excellent job, and all of a sudden their work product, has plummeted, their demeanor has really changed? Are they trying to avoid somebody for what reason? Hey Diana, can you go deliver these documents to Jane's office? What, I'd rather not go to Jane's office. Can somebody else take them? Okay, why? Right, what's going on? Why don't you want to go to Jane's office? So, know your employees, stay involved, know the people in the district, stay involved. If you do see this change, it's okay to inquire, right? Hey, you want to make sure everything's okay? Is there anything you need to tell me, right? Okay. So,
I have a question.
yes,
I always like to get free legal advice.
free legal advice, all right.
At special districts, we deal with the public.
Mhm.
Okay, what are the boundaries with the public and the responsibility of the districts to insulate our employees from the same kind of harassment?
So what are the responsibilities of the district to insulate your employees from the same type of harassment as, coming from the public towards your employees? Right, so, we do have a duty to provide a safe work environment to our employees, right? We can't necessarily deny somebody services, depending on your district, what sorts of services you provide, but you can find alternatives. For example, if it's somebody that is constantly coming to your office and they yell and harass, and you could ask them to call, and you could maybe conduct business by mail, email, something like that, so there's not that direct contact. I know we've had situations where one member of the public gets fixated on one employee. So if that person comes into the office, we let that employee know, and that employee doesn't have to interact with that member of the public. So there are ways around it. If it gets to the point where, it does become, dangerous, I think there would be some sort of solution where that person just wouldn't be allowed inside the building anymore. And then, like I said, conduct business over the phone, through the mail, or via email, right? But you also want to make sure that if they're in your building, they're there for, it's not just there to loiter, right? They're actually there to conduct business. So those are some ways you could insulate your employees. And if, somebody does come in, you can have a supervisor or somebody try to diffuse the situation and ask the person to, talk to them, maybe have them come back in 5 minutes after they cooled off. But you do have that responsibility to protect, to provide a safe environment for your employees. If that sort of answers your question. Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah,
I can come back to you if you want to think about it. All right, I'll come back to you. Okay, so our next slide here, sexual harassment can occur in a variety of circumstances, including but not limited to the following. The victim and the harasser may be a woman or a man. The victim does not have to be of the opposite sex. So I think generally most people think, when they think of sexual harassment, they think of a man harassing a woman, right? That's not the only type of harassment we have. It could be a woman towards a woman towards a woman, a man towards a man, right? There are no gender boundaries on sexual harassment. The harasser can be the victim's supervisor, an agent of the employee, a supervisor in another area, a coworker, or a non-employee. That's when we're talking about, members of the public. And the victim does not have to be the person harassed, but could be anyone affected by the offensive conduct. So if, you're in the same office and you're witnessing the offensive conduct, you could also report that. It's not just a person who is a recipient of the offensive conduct. Okay? And severe pervasive. So I mentioned earlier, severe, the seriousness, pervasive, the frequency. We consider all these circumstances, the nature of the conduct, the severity of the conduct, the frequency of the conduct and the period of time over which it occurred. And is there an unreasonable interference with an employee's work performance? So do you think one incident could be enough to constitute sexual harassment? Yeah, right? Just depends on what it is, right? Depends on what that incident is. Or we have, a lot of smaller incidents that occur over a long period of time, right? That would look towards the pervasiveness of it. So we have to be cognizant of both types of behavior. Because sexual harassment is not always, just blatant. Like it's not just, somebody comes up and slaps someone on the bottom. Would that be sexual harassment? Yeah, probably, right? Do you think you need more than one incident of slapping on the bottom to address it? No, right? You're probably going to address it and tell that person that's not appropriate for the workplace, right? So it depends on the behavior. Okay, so there are two types of sexual harassment. The first is quid pro quo, and then we have a hostile work environment. What does quid pro quo mean? It means this for that. We have job benefits promised in exchange for sexual favors, or denied for sexual favors not given. Explicitly, sleep with me or I'll fire you. Right? If you don't have sex with me, you're fired. Implicitly, hey, if you hung out with me, hey, maybe if you went and had drinks with me down at the Vintage Press, we could talk about you working on that big new assignment we have. Explicit, you don't see, we don't see it really in the county as well as Tulare County as an employer. I'm not sure about special districts, I hope not. But there was a big case happening in Madera of explicit sexual harassment, and it was happening at a packing house there. So the foreman at that packing house would tell some female employees, if you don't have sex with me, you're fired, and I'm going to fire your friends and any family members you may have here. Unfortunately, that went on for a couple of years. But I think the difference there, the difference with maybe county employee and district employees is that the employees at the packing house may not have been as sophisticated in the laws that protect them as, employees, as county employees are, or, district employees would be. So I think that's why it happened for a while. What we might see is more of the implicit, if you hung out with me, you might get better assignments. That's one of those, it could get into one of those gray areas where, hey, I just wanna have lunch and we can talk about this assignment over lunch. That's fine, you can have a lunch meeting, we have lunch meetings, but stick to work, right? Don't make the person getting the assignment or getting to work on the big case contingent on going out to lunch or contingent on going out to dinner, right? I like to play it conservatively and say, if you're going to talk about business, no alcohol, right? No alcohol, because then that could take, cross boundaries, right? If you're talking about business, go have lunch downtown somewhere, right? If that's the type of meeting you wanna take. Question?
In my line of work, I tend to send some of the employees over to our, my Navy Wind board member. And I'll call the board member and say, we're gonna drop off something to you. Now, if that board member is dressed inappropriately when my employee shows up, is that harassment?
Is the board member at their home?
Yeah, she's at her home.
So here we have the situation where something is being dropped off to a board member at the board member's home, and the board member is dressed inappropriately.
Well, if the board member knows someone's coming, they should be dressed appropriately.
If the board member knows someone's coming, they should be dressed appropriately. Yeah, I think I would let the board member know, if that has happened, I would let the board member, ask them if they could, put on a robe or something if an employee is coming to their home. That's one of those where if it would be considered sexual harassment, I think I need more facts on that.
I think she's
But
oblivious. I bet, like it's just maybe an old shirt that just has inappropriate holes in it.
it's an old shirt that has inappropriate holes in it. How about we give her a gift of a new shirt? Kidding. I think it's worth having the conversation with that board member and, letting her know that, hey, if you're dressed that way, it makes our employees feel uncomfortable. Right, but I think in that situation, we'd be looking more at the pervasive versus, the seriousness one. Any other questions? Okay. I'll just finish up this slide. Yeah. So the next type of sexual harassment we have is hostile work environment. And hostile work environment is a term that gets thrown around a lot by, every type of employee in every type of industry. But what it really means is, here under sexual harassment, it's unwanted advances, sexualized work environment, toleration of sexual innuendo, and it's based on sex. So it has to be based on some sort of protected class, right? Here for hostile work environment based on sex, we're talking about based on gender, right? It could, and again, like I said, it doesn't matter if it's male to female, female to male, male to male, whatever it may be. So when we're talking about hostile work environment, we have to see if there is a protected class that is being affected. So we'll talk a little bit more about hostile work environment when we look at just the protected classes in general. So we'll do this true false and then we'll take a break. I am not sexually attracted to any of my employees or coworkers, so none of the comments I make can be considered sexual harassment. False. What do you think? True or false? False. False. Sexual harassment is treating someone in a harassing and inappropriate way because of their sex, gender, gender identity, or gender expression. It does not require sexual desire. And people can harass people of the same sex. Questions on that? All right, so let's take a break. And we'll come back and resume the rest of the training.
Paper for your proof of participation in this training for the 2-hour part on preventing sexual harassment and other kinds of discrimination. If you happen to be an attorney, this 2-hour part also counts for continuing ed for attorneys. And so do we have anybody in that category besides those of us on staff who are here? Okay, we won't worry about it then, because we have a separate sign-in form and a separate proof of participation thing for that, but we won't have our paralegal go and make any extra copies for that. But if you have attorneys on your board, let them know next time that we offer it that they'll be able to get continuing ed credit for coming. So with that, we'll go back in for the rest of this part of the training.
Okay, so we did our false question. Now let's talk about the gray areas. What about private and consensual relationships between supervisors and subordinates? Or between coworkers? Those are all gray areas, right? Because the cases we see, have to do with when you first start dating somebody, right? It's all sunshine and rainbows, right? It's great. And then here comes the breakup. Right, so the cases we see that have been litigated, throughout the state usually come after the breakup. And it'll usually be the subordinate, if the subordinate, did not want to break up, saying they were forced into this relationship because they were told that if they weren't in this relationship, if they didn't date their supervisor, they would be fired or they wouldn't be promoted, they would suffer some sort of adverse employment action. So again, it's one of those, gray areas where is it necessarily illegal? No. Is it something you want to stay away from? The conservative approach would be, yeah, you do, but, again, it's not illegal, but, think about it. Off-duty conduct. That's something else that we have to consider, right? And that's a question we get a lot from our clients. It's, what about off-duty conduct? This happened while people were off-duty. What do you think about that?
And always represent your organization, then you should.
You always represent your organization, so you should always be on your best behavior? I mean, that's what we hope, right? But really what we look for is there some sort of connection? Is there some sort of nexus to the workplace, right? If there was a real interesting case having to do with Fry's Electronics. Is anyone familiar with Fry's Electronics? They're like a Best Buy, like a Circuit City from back in the day. There's none here in the Valley that I know of, but I know there's some in LA, the LA area. There's some in Sacramento. So there, a female supervisor started texting and calling a male subordinate. He wasn't really a subordinate, he worked in a different department, but she sometimes supervised him and could give him orders to, do whatever work-related stuff she needed him to do. So she started contacting him off-duty. It was never while they were working. It was always while they were both off of work, on the cell phone. She got his phone number from the emergency contacts list at work. And, was sending very sexually charged, almost violent text messages to him. Again, off-duty, They weren't working, and it was their personal devices. He filed a complaint. Do you think that supervisor was found liable for sexual harassment?
Yeah. She obtained it.
Why? She obtained it for work. That was one of the things they looked at. Why else? Where is he encountering her? Where does he see her? At work, right? At work. So all of the effect of this behavior was felt at work, right? So that's something the courts look at when it comes to off-duty conduct. So, you know, if there's a nexus to the workplace, you know, the employer, the district can get involved and, you know, put a stop to it. Gray areas, again, invitation to lunch, dinner, or drinks. You know, we already talked a little bit about that. You know, a lot of us have lunch meetings. Again, the conservative approach, don't have alcohol if you're talking about business, right? It's business related. You know, try to keep it during work hours if possible, right? References to appearance or dress. You know, it depends on the circumstances, right? If I, you know, let my coworker Matt hear, hey Matt, that's a really nice tie. Is that sexual harassment? Well, it depends how Matt takes it, right? Matt might think, hey, that's kind of offensive. So, you know, think about that. You know, I've seen people say, hey, you know, that's a really nice dress. That's a really nice, you know, pair of jeans, whatever it may be. So, again, we look at circumstances as a whole versus, you know, the case I was telling you about earlier where he was saying, gosh, that's such a beautiful blouse. Why don't you take your sweater off so we can all admire it? Right? Maybe that takes it up a notch. So, you know, be careful with those. Casual touching of non-intimate parts of the body. What do you think about that? You know, what if somebody comes up behind you and starts, oh, you look tense, let me rub your back. Some of us might be okay with that. Probably not, right? I tell my clients, I go, are you a physical therapist for the county? Is that your job? And everyone says, no, it's not. And it's, don't touch people, right? Because that's really the most conservative approach, right? Don't touch people. Hugging is a big question, because some people like to hug, right? There was a case not too long ago involving a law enforcement officer in Northern California who liked to hug, and he was in a management position. And so one of his female subordinates made a complaint and said he's sexually harassing because he hugs all the time. And you know, they looked at they interviewed people, they looked at the facts, and he did hug all the time, but he only hugged certain women all the time. And it was usually, you know, younger, cute women. He didn't hug men, right? He didn't hug men, he didn't hug any of his male employees, but he was always, you know, hugging certain women. So they found there was, you know, sexual harassment there. So again, these are all gray areas that you have to think about and be aware that, you know, sometimes it, you know, depending on the circumstances, it could be considered sexual harassment. Okay. Another case I like to mention before we conclude the sexual harassment case is one that happened a couple of years ago having to do with San Diego Mayor Bob Filner. Is everyone familiar with San Diego Mayor Bob Filner? He was a newly elected mayor in San Diego. He was an older gentleman who I think had been a member of either the state senate or the assembly, right? And then he ran for mayor and he won. He was, I think he was in his 70s or 60s or 70s, but anyhow, he considered himself a real ladies' man. So he would go around hugging all the female employees. He would forcefully kiss them. You know, he would say things like, you know, I think tomorrow would be a good day where nobody should wear panties to work. You know, just most of us would think just very wrong type of behavior, right? So, a female employee sued, and the city of San Diego said, hey Mayor, you're on your own. We're not getting involved. You pay your own legal costs. You know, this is all on you. And the mayor said, well, no, actually, no, city, it's on you. Because I was never told I had to take training like the one you're in right now. So I didn't know I could do all those things. So it's actually your fault, city, because you didn't train me properly, so I would know I couldn't do these things. You know, that's a clever response to that, right? In the end, what ended up happening was, in exchange for his resignation, they defended him and picked up his legal bills. But just think about that. I mean, you know, he was all over the paper. He made national news, and you know, he left in disgrace because he had to resign over these allegations. So don't be San Diego Mayor Buffalo, right? Okay, next topic: dating a subordinate. Again, kind of goes with the gray areas we talked about. You know, if you're dating a subordinate, there's going to be a need for a change in the reporting line. We always tell our clients if somebody in the position of authority is dating someone who, you know, they directly supervise, you have to change the reporting line. You can't have the subordinate reporting to that person. There's issues with productivity, favoritism, discipline, working with the next, cost of the employer for your mistakes. You know, and I think the productivity, favoritism, and discipline all kind of go together. You know, if you're dating a subordinate, you know, or just someone who works with you or for you, when we're talking about subordinate, you know, and the person, instead of, you know, if they have to write some sort of, let's say they're writing up a budget for your district, but instead of writing up the budget, they are on Expedia.com booking a romantic vacation for the two of you. Are you going to tell them to stop and do the budget report? Who would tell them to stop and do the budget report? No, you wouldn't. You would let them book that vacation for the two of you, right? So other people see this, right? Other people see, hey, she or he, they're not doing their work. That person's playing favorites, right? There's favoritism issues. And then are you going to discipline this person that, you know, is booking this romantic vacation that makes you so happy? Are you really going to discipline them and deal with it at home later? No, right? You're not. So think about all those issues that, you know, it really affects office morale if you know, it gets to that point. Think about working with an ex. Awkward, right? Yeah, I think, you know, it's not the most pleasant experience, right? And especially in your districts, think about how small your districts are, right? Cost to the employer for your mistakes. You already talked about that a little bit. I talked about the lawsuits that we see across the state where, you know, the subordinate may say, hey, the only reason I dated this person was because they told me if I didn't, I was going to suffer an adverse employment action. So I'm filing a lawsuit, right? How much is it going to cost your employer to defend that lawsuit? What about damages they have to pay, right? Those are all things to consider when talking about dating a subordinate. So let's look at our next scenario. Cam, an office supervisor, was dating Morgan, an office receptionist, for 2 years. While Cam and Morgan were dating, Morgan got every Friday off. After Cam and Morgan broke up, the days off were more evenly split amongst all the receptionists. Morgan has come to you, Cam's boss, to complain that Cam has stopped giving Morgan every Friday off. Think you have an issue here? Possibly. So you're a camp supervisor, what are you gonna do?
I suppose you can't say you were lucky you got the ones off to the slot.
You're lucky you got the Fridays off, now deal with it. Yeah, no, you're not gonna say that. Yeah, you're probably gonna, you know, do you think is there some sexual harassment here? Maybe a little favoritism when they were in a dating relationship, right? So you probably want to investigate, right? We want some more facts. So we're gonna report, or we're gonna investigate, you know, what's your role? Because question 2, has Cam engaged in sexual harassment? What about quid pro quo sexual harassment? If you're dating me, you get every Friday off, right? Was that their agreement? We don't know, right? So we would have to do a little investigation on that. Does it matter that there was never a verbal or written statement that Morgan would get every Friday off? Doesn't, right? Doesn't have to be in writing, doesn't have to be stated. As they say, actions speak louder than words, right? We have to see what the practice was. And is the employer subject to liability because of the relationship? Possibly, right? Possibly. We also have to see, okay, you know, what about the other office receptionists, right? The other office assistants. Were they suffering adverse employment actions because they weren't in a relationship with Cam? Right? Because Morgan was getting all the benefit of getting Friday off. What if the other ones wanted Friday off, but Cam said no because he was giving Fridays off to Morgan? Right? So again, those are all things that come out that you're going to try to find out in your investigation. So again, report, investigate. So what should management do in these dating a subordinate situations? You change the reporting line. You clarify and document that both parties are in the relationship consensually. In an ideal world, if this is happening, the two people in the relationship would go to management and let them know that, you know, they're in a relationship. So you can, you know, change their reporting line, talk to the subordinate first, make sure they're not being forced into the relationship, you know, just document that they're both in the relationship consensually. Does that ever happen? I've never heard of that happen. The only time where you see this change in the reporting line is when people are married, you know, and you really can't hide that they're in a relationship, because what we see is most employees try to hide that they're in a relationship. So people are married and they'll come and say, hey, you know, obviously we're married, I'm the supervisor, so we change the reporting line. Clarify and document what each employee wants regarding transfer changes. Do not discuss openly with coworkers, you know, because you want to avoid gossip. So you clarify and document that your employee, especially a subordinate, has been subject to harassment by coworkers, you know, any jealousy, gossip, suspicion. So, questions on this topic? All right. So, abusive conduct, hostile work environment.
I have one question.
Yes.
So is training like this also required of board members by the state law?
Is training like this also required of board members?
Board members of special districts?
What's that? Yeah. Yeah, the board members get it as well. I was going to say, you know, our board members usually attend the sexual harassment trainings, but back then it wasn't a legal requirement. It was kind of a gray area, but now with this new law that passed, they're required to take it.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, so the abusive conduct, hostile work environment. Abusive conduct is another law that was recently passed, where the legislature said, you know, employers, you need to talk to your employees about abusive conduct. And what is abusive conduct? It's otherwise known as bullying. And if you remember, you know, not that long ago, you don't hear too much in the news now, but, you know, there was right now it's the Me Too movement. But there was a time where bullying was on the news a lot. You know, we you heard about school bullying, workplace bullying. So it became a real issue that the legislature said, okay, we need to make sure employers know about bullying and what is not permitted. Generally, it's not permitted, right? So when we're talking about abusive conduct, it's malicious conduct, objectively and subjectively hostile or offensive, and it's unrelated to the employer's legitimate business reasons or business interests. Some examples are repeated verbal abuse, threatening, intimidating, or humiliating verbal or physical conduct, and gratuitous sabotage or undermining of a person's work. So these are all examples of bullying. What is not bullying? What is not abusive conduct? A supervisor holding a subordinate accountable for his or her performance. Right? If you tell your employee to do their work, that's not abusive conduct. Generally, right? It depends on how you tell them. Right? If you get in their face, if you shove them, if you yell, if you humiliate them, then it's probably going to be abusive conduct, right? But if you're just telling them, okay, I need you to do your work, I need you to finish these reports. If you're holding them accountable, not abusive conduct. An isolated incident of inappropriate behavior, probably not abusive conduct. If you lose your cool once, you're probably okay. It doesn't rise to the level of abusive conduct. It might be considered rude and discourteous, or whatever your district policies are on that type of behavior. But if we're seeing, more than an isolated incident, then we're starting to look at it being abusive conduct. So abusive conduct versus illegal harassment. Harassing conduct is directed at someone's membership in the protected classification. Harassment is illegal. Abusive conduct is not directed at someone's membership in a protected classification. It's not illegal, but should be addressed internally. So something to remember is that the requirement of this training of the, talking to you about abusive conduct does not give people another cause of action to file a complaint, right? You can't file an abusive conduct complaint with, say, the DFEH or the EOC. I think right now what the legislature is doing is allowing employers to get the training out, talk to their employees about it, make sure they know that bullying is not permitted, and I think down the road it's going to become another cause of action. But at this point it's not. And then we have hostile work environment. And like I said before, hostile work environment is a term that gets thrown around a lot, It's like, oh, they took away our Keurig coffee maker and gave us crappy coffee. Hostile work environment, right? Not what it means, right? What we're talking about is discriminatory conduct or behavior in the place of work that is unwelcome and offensive to an employer or group of employees based on a protected class or characteristic. You have to have that protected class or characteristic for it to rise to the level of hostile work environment. And that's usually what we're missing, right? That when people just talk about hostile work environment, they're missing that protected class or characteristic. So a pattern of repeated conduct which is sufficiently severe or pervasive that it changes the terms and conditions of employment. And the complainant must be a member of the protected class or characteristic. So that's what hostile work environment is. So if we're talking about behavior that is not geared towards someone's protected class or characteristic, what do? How do we approach it? What are your agency's rules? Do you have policies regarding conduct? Do you have any discipline policies in your agencies? Do you discipline employees in your agencies? In your districts? I'm seeing some yeses, some I'm not sure. Yeah, find out what your policies are. See if they need to be updated. If the last time somebody looked at them was 1980, they probably need to be updated, right? So look at your policies. Be aware there may be hidden protected class issues. That's another really interesting concept. There was a great case out of Alaska that talked about hidden protected class issues. So in Alaska, there was like a school district, school scenario where you had the superintendent, I think, was also the principal, and may also have been a teacher at this school. And he was a real bully. I mean, everybody knew him as a bully. Every time somebody came and talked to him, he would get in their face, he would yell, he would throw things. He was always reluctant to give people time off. You know, when the witnesses were testifying during the trial, one of the female teachers said, you know, that she was always afraid to ask for time off because he always made such a big deal about it and made them feel guilty and usually denied it. So she wanted to come to California to see her sister who had a disease. And so she went over a long weekend, I think it was a Labor Day weekend, and then asked for another day off. And then when she came back, they had a meeting first thing in the morning on the day she got back, and she asked him, you know, is there anything I need to bring to this meeting? And he used, you know, very foul language, telling her, well, you know, if you would have been here, you would know, and you wouldn't be asking these dumb questions. But, you know, throwing a couple of very foul and offensive words in there, and that's how he responded. So a group of female teachers sued and said, you know, he's discriminating in a hostile work environment based on our gender. He's discriminated against us because we're women. So the trial court found no hostile work environment. He's a jerk to everybody, you know, equal opportunity jerk, and he treats everybody the same. So they appealed that case. And at the appeal level, what they found was, you know, one of the examples they used was, you know, all the female employees were saying how difficult it was for them to get time off. And all the male employees were saying, well, you know, anytime we want to go hunting and fishing, guess what? Go for it. Have a great time. Take as much time as you need. Bring me back some fish. Right? So there was this hidden protected class issue. Because, you know, if you look at it just on the surface, it seemed like he was just a jerk to everybody. Right? But once you really got into the nitty-gritty and got into the details of it, you found that he did treat the women more poorly than he treated the men. So they found hostile work environment in that situation. So again, you have to be really cognizant about what's going on in your districts. So again, if there's no protected class issue, you know, it's not hostile work environment, is it abusive conduct? Right? Because like I said before, workplace bullying may lead to illegally cognizable harassment or discrimination. Right? Is there more there? Is this getting to the point where it's coming out of the sexual harassment and going into more like a tort claim or some other type of claim? So let's look at our next scenario. We have Sam. He's an agent. Yes.
Is there any policies and procedures that the county has that apply to special districts?
Are there any county policies or procedures that apply to special districts? No, right? Yeah, you're independent, so you would have your own. Yeah, I mean, the county in and of itself for county employees has many, many, many policies. But for special districts, you would have your own. All right, so scenario. Let's look at Sam. He's an agency, he or she, we don't know, is an agency employee. Sam is supervised by Mel. Sam has a very loud voice and is known by coworkers to have a short fuse. One day, Sam tries to check out a specific agency car, but finds the car is not in the parking lot. Sam goes to Mel's office and asks where the car is. Mel responds that the car is not available for use. Sam gets really loud and repeats the request for that specific car. Mel again responds that it is not available. Sam's voice gets so loud that you, another supervisor, hear it 20 feet down the hall. You walk to Mel's office and observe Mel backed into a corner and Sam blocking the exit. Sam is shouting, arms waving, acting in an agitated manner. Mel looks nervous and uncomfortable. What do you do now?
Call security.
Call security. What if there is no security?
Pull out your gun.
Pull out your gun. No, we do not do that. What do you think?
Call the police or
Call the police? What was?
You gotta calm the situation somewhere.
Yeah, we try to diffuse the situation somehow, right? Maybe ask Sam, hey Sam, what's going on? Let's talk outside, right? You probably want to try to diffuse the situation here. Obviously Sam is very agitated. Maybe want to try to calm Sam down. Help Mel get out of there if Mel needs to get out and compose him or herself. Doesn't matter here if we're talking about male, female. If male or female, no, it doesn't, right? It doesn't. Do you think Sam's created a hostile work environment?
Maybe no, because there's no class. There's no protected class.
We don't know, right? Because we don't have enough information here to know if there's a protected class. Right? Are we talking about Mel being hot-headed with everybody? Or are we talking about Sam being hot-headed with everybody? Or is Sam treating Mel, this way because Mel is part of a protected class?
Well, no, it says he acts like that with everybody.
With everybody.
But Mel's the supervisor.
Mel's a supervisor? All right, so Mel. Yeah, Mel's a supervisor. Is a supervisor a protected class? No.
You shouldn't be yelling at the supervisor.
What's that?
You shouldn't yell at the supervisor.
You shouldn't yell at the supervisor. I 100% agree with that. So how would you, if there is no hostile work environment, do we think this is bullying?
He's
Abusive conduct?
He's insubordinate.
He's insubordinate? So do we address it with our discipline policies? Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. It's not necessarily a hostile work environment. We don't have enough information. Is it abusive conduct, bullying? We'd also have to gather more information on that. Is it harassment? Possibly, right? We need more facts, but it kind of gets you thinking, right? Okay, what do I need to find out? Can we discipline for that? I think everybody agrees. Yes, right? Yes. And again, you look at your policies, at your discipline policies, at your conduct policies to address it that way. So make sure you've looked at your policies recently and they're updated. Okay, so our next topic is retaliation. And these are the don't get back at me statutes I was talking about earlier. So it occurs when an employee has engaged in protected activity, the employer subjected the employee to an adverse employment action, and there is a causal link between the protected activity and the employer's action. So we'll talk about protected activity in a bit. We've already talked about adverse employment actions, right? And there's a causal link, right? There's some sort of link between the protected activity and the employer's action. Did the employer take this action because the employee partook in this protected activity? What are protected activities? Whistleblowing, right? Complaining about an unlawful employment practice. Filing a complaint, testifying, assisting a complainant, refusing to follow an order reasonably believed to be unlawful. Right? These are all forms of protected activity. So an employee cannot suffer an adverse employment action because they filed a complaint. Right? That can't be the reason why they're suffering from this adverse employment action. So we have, employer retaliation versus, there could also be coworker retaliation. Item materially affects employment. It's likely to impair job performance or advancement. And I think the next one is the most important one. It discourages others from engaging in a protected activity. Right? We don't want to discourage people from reporting any unlawful activities. If they have a complaint, we don't want them to be deterred from filing a complaint. And don't bring parties together to work it out, because retaliation can be perceived, even if not intended. Say my coworker files a sexual harassment complaint against me. And he says, "Boss, Diana's been sexually harassing me." And my boss says, "Well, you know what? Let's bring Diana in here and talk about it. We can resolve this." Good idea, bad idea? Bad idea, right? Bad idea. It's, okay, I feel I'm being retaliated against. I just, an investigation needs to be done. I don't, need to be in the same room with my harasser. The person might then, be too afraid just to really, you know what, never mind. I was just kidding, right? And that's the last thing you want, right? If something legitimate is going on, you want to be able to address it and correct it. Okay, so true, false. If an employee files a complaint alleging that I have harassed him, I can no longer discipline the employee. True or false? True? Is it hands off as soon as somebody files a complaint?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. If that was the case, then everybody would go file complaints right now, right? Hands off? No, false. It's false. But be careful, beware. This is when we get into those delicate situations where, you want to probably talk to counsel, talk to your HR person. As an employer, you still have an obligation to hold your subordinates accountable, but you really have to be careful on how you approach the employee discipline. What we see sometimes is an employee will see the writing on the wall, and they know, they're about to get disciplined, so then they go file a complaint. And they think, okay, as soon as I file a complaint, it's hands off, they can't do anything, right? Not the case, right? You take it on two separate tracks, right? You have the complaint, and then you have the personnel action, right? We have to make sure, and this is something I have not stressed enough, or stressed at all, I think, during this training, is you have to document, right? You have to document. If you're going to discipline this employee, if you're heading that route, make sure you have the documentations to back you up, right? Whatever that documentation may be, if it's performance evaluations, if you've given them, memos, if you have emails, whatever it may be, make sure you have that documentation to back up the discipline action you're taking. All right, sometimes I'll get a call from a client and say, "Hey Diana, this person has been, a terrible employee for the last 3 years, and we're just kind of to the point where I don't think it's going to work out because they never, they're always rude, they never do their reports, it's just not working out. So we need to move forward with this." And what do you think I say to them? What's the first thing I ask them for? Yeah, all right. Show me their performance evaluations. What documentation do you have? Have you counseled this person? Have you sent them a counseling memo, an email where you brought this up? Have you put them on a corrective action plan? What do you have to back up what you're saying? Well, on their last performance evaluation, they got an 8 out of 10. And I'm thinking, an 8 out of 10? What is that? An 8 out of 10 means they're a stellar employee. They're the best thing since sliced bread. How am I supposed to support this discipline when you're showing me a performance evaluation that's an 8 out of 10? Right, so that's why you really need that documentation to back you up, right? And what we see sometimes is supervisors, or whoever it is that's writing these performance evaluations, they want to be the good guy, right? They want to be liked. They want to be the popular supervisor. So they're not honest in the evaluations. They fluff it up a little bit, right? Because they don't want confrontation. They don't want to be known as the mean supervisor. But when you have issues down the road, you're not going to be able to support those if your documentation isn't truly reflecting what's going on, right? So you have to remember that as well. But yeah, documentation is key. Timing is key. If let's take a different approach at this. Somebody files a complaint, and then you call me and say, Okay, I need to discipline this person. Why? They filed a complaint yesterday. Oh, they were 5 minutes late this morning, so we need to discipline them. What does that look like? That looks like retaliation, right? Okay. Have you counseled them? Have they been late before? So timing is really important as well. Right? Timing is really important as well. So something, just if there is a legitimate discipline route you're taking, keep them separate and make sure you have documentation to back you up. Okay, so as we're winding down, these are cases filed with the EOC. As I mentioned before, the EOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This is a federal agency, so these are numbers from across the country. We see, in 2016, look at retaliation. Retaliation is always the highest, usually, but here it's the highest filed types of complaints. Right, and what we see is a lot of employees will file, say, a disability claim or an age claim, and then they'll tack on retaliation to it as well. So in 2016, there were about 42,000 retaliation claims filed with the EOC. These are cases filed with the FEH. This is only California. And what if you see here, retaliation also going up, right? In 2012, you had about, close to 4,000. And then in 2015, we had over 6,000, right? So those claims really shot up. And then the most filed, I'd say it's close between sex discrimination and disability discrimination in California. So there were, close to 14,000 disability discrimination cases filed in 2012, over 12,000 in 2015. So, and this is only in California. Okay, so supervisor's role, I would say, anyone in a supervisory position, make sure you know how to identify harassment and discrimination. We've gone over that today. Respond to complaints of harassment or discrimination. How do you respond to those? You're on notice of harassment even without a complaint, right? You don't have to write it down. It doesn't have to be in a, one-page letter, double-spaced, 12 font, right? It doesn't have to be on an official document. If you're told, if you're emailed, if you witness something, when you're on notice, do something, right? Whatever that may be for you. If it's reporting, if it's investigating, make sure to take some action. Receive the complaint with compassion. If the person comes to you, what do you mean Joe's been sexually harassing you? That's impossible, right? Don't make judgments right when you receive a complaint. Just, okay, thank you for bringing this forward. We will, we'll review the complaint and, get back to you. Something along those lines. How to deal with a request that nothing be done. I want to tell you, that I want to let you know that, Diana's been sexually harassing me, but I don't want you to do anything about it. I just want you to know, but just don't do anything about it. What do you think?
Can't do that.
Can't do that, right? Once you know, you're on notice. Because the first thing that person's going to say in their lawsuit is, I told my supervisor and they did nothing about it. Now when you take the stand and you say, well yeah, they told me, but they told me not to do anything about it, is that going to carry much weight with the court? No, it's going to carry zero weight with the court. How do you deal with that? This happened to me once, where somebody came to my office and said, hey Diane, I need to tell you something, but I don't want you to tell anybody. So what do you think I did? Don't tell me, right? No, I said, well, I just want you to know that it depends on what you tell me. If it's something that I have to report, I have a duty to do that. But if, obviously if it's something that's bothering you, please let me know so we could we could address it. Right now, we'll keep it on a need-to-know basis. And I think people are really afraid everybody's going to find out what's going on, so you let them know, you keep it on a need-to-know basis. In that situation, it had nothing to do with work, it was something personal, so, you know, I didn't have to worry about it, but I made sure that person knew that, you know, depending on what she told me, I may have to report it. Okay, immediately advise management, do not screen. How many of you have the authority to initiate an investigation? Yeah, a couple of you? Okay. For the most of us, we don't, right? So don't screen, right? Don't make the determination. You know, let me go back to my training documents. What was Diana talking about? Is this sexual harassment? Is it not? Don't, right? Make sure to report it. And whoever has the authority to, you know, initiate an investigation, conduct an investigation, you know, let them do what they need to do so they can determine whether or not sexual harassment or, you know, discrimination or retaliation is occurring. So, some do's and don'ts. Do cooperate in the investigation. Do assure there's no retaliation. Take appropriate corrective action. Be a good role model. I can't stress enough how important that is. Be a good role model, right? If, you know, you're one of the managers, if you're one of the board members, and you're partaking in this type of inappropriate behavior, you know, your subordinates are going to think that it's okay. It's okay for you to, you know, make that joke or, you know, make those comments, right? So be a good role model. Don't screen complaints. Don't bring parties together to sort it out. Don't promise an outcome or confidentiality. No, I can't believe Diana's doing that. She's so fired, right? For most of us, it's not our role to determine if someone's fired or not. Plus, you don't want to fire someone without doing an investigation and having, you know, something to back up your employment actions. So don't promise outcome or confidentiality. And don't add to the problem, right? Don't forward the email with the inappropriate joke on it, with the inappropriate picture. You know, there was a council member up in Atwater a couple of years ago that had an email which compared then First Lady Michelle Obama to, I think it was like a gorilla or something. Like, it was a very offensive email. And so he forwarded it to a group of his friends because he thought it was funny. And then guess what? Some of those friends did. Forwarded it to some of their friends, who then forwarded it to some of their friends, and it ended up in the inbox of the local newspaper. And guess what next morning the front page story was? Racist council member, right? I think that council member ended up resigning after that. So, you know, don't add to the problem. And again, with the emails, be careful with the emails. Because once, you know, you forward, then everybody can see where it came from. So, some forums to address discrimination, harassment, or retaliation. You can file a grievance or, you know, just file a complaint with your district. You can file with the DFEH, you can file with the EOC, or you can go to the courts. Before people can go to the courts, they have to file with either DFEH or EOC. And the DFEH or EOC will either, you know, if the person wants, they can conduct the investigation and make findings. Or if the person just wants to go straight to the courts, they will tell the DFEH or EOC, hey, I don't want you to investigate, I want just to go to the courts. So they open the file and close it immediately and issue what's called a right to sue letter, so the person could go straight to the courts without having to exhaust other administrative remedies. You know, one of the trainings I was giving, one of the participants said, hey Diane, I think it's important for you to let people know that this could be a very, very long process, especially if you're named individually. You know, if you're named as one of the people the employee's complaining against. Because a DFEH or EOC take up to 1 year to complete their investigation. And then say they make findings that there was, no laws broken, no violations. The employee can then still go to the courts. And that could take, even another year, another 2 years, depending on the facts, depending on how impacted the courts are. So it could be, numerous years before this is resolved. So, it's one of the other reasons we always try to give these trainings to make sure people understand what steps they need to take, how to identify discrimination, harassment, retaliation, make sure you report and investigate, because, it's not a pleasant experience to go through. So, some prevention tips: don't engage in risky behavior, report all complaints immediately, take all complaints seriously, monitor the workplace, follow policies. Again, take a look at your policies. Take a look at your policies, make sure they're updated, make sure they weren't, like I said, written in 1980 and never been updated. So look at your policies. And lastly, I think I've stressed this a lot, but don't add to the problem. Okay, don't add to the problem. So, any questions? Yes.
Going back to your chart, the EEOC is a federal,
Yes.
and they represent all 50 states, right?
They do.
And the FEA, whatever it is, California.
The FEA
I
is
found it very interesting that the retaliation statistics for the EEOC were 42,000. And for the DEFA, it's 14,000.
Yeah.
That's 1/3 of the total from one state, the state of California.
Correct.
That makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It makes you wonder, right? Are we a litigious state?
I can't hear you.
I said, are we a litigious state? Do people in California like to sue?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, they like to file complaints. So, no, that's a great observation. It was 1/3. And we're 1 out of 56. So, any other questions? Okay, Michelle in the back has the certificates, right? Yes, so Michelle in the back in the purple has, yeah, you can, so let's stand up and stretch, and if you want to go grab your certificates from Michelle, make sure to grab those, so turn them into your district so you can get credit. And the certificates have to be kept for at least 5 years by your district. Okay, 5 years.
He doesn't stop and listen to what you're saying.
No, he thinks it's like my son was a player.
So what we're going to do is we won't have dollars, we won't have individual contestants, but what we will do is We'll have the clues and then ask you to provide the questions. And then we've got candy. So for successful responses. And then we'll stop and do little training things as we go along. So we just thought it'd be a fun way to reinforce some of the things that you've had at other trainings and a little bit from tonight and just general things that are good to be reminded of. And so we'll go ahead and do that and start with the next slide, and we'll tell you about the categories. So our categories for tonight are fun with forms, filling vacancies, that means on the board, the Brown Act, which of course is our open meetings law for local agencies in California, doing business, so just some of the general business kinds of things that are applicable to special districts, conflicts of interest, which are always of importance, and then finally, just for fun, Tulare County trivia. So we'll go on to the board, and hopefully you can see it. It's a little clearer on that one than it is on the one up front. So who wants to pick a category and an amount? Okay.
Brown Act for 100.
When a majority of a legislative body discusses an item within its subject matter jurisdiction, give me the question that this would be.
What is a violation?
What? So if we click on answer then, it tells us what is a meeting. You just had a meeting. And if it wasn't properly posted under the Brown Act, you probably had an illegal meeting. And that's particularly difficult for special district boards with 3 members. Because when you run into one other board member at the grocery store, you've got a majority of the board standing there. So you have to be really careful about not doing substantive board business when you run into each other in the community. So with a little bigger board, you have to have 3 of you, but still, it's something to be careful about in avoiding doing substantive district business. The idea of the Brown Act is the public needs to be there, needs to be able to observe you, wrestling with those things, discussing, talking, just discussing is a board meeting. The classic case on this is the school district that was having a curriculum controversy, and the superintendent invited the board members over to his house to see this video of a documentary of how another school district had handled a similar controversy. No action, no nothing. They just watched this video. And the court said, that was a board meeting. You were discussing something substantive related to your business that the public needed to know what you were seeing. Next answer, or next clue, I guess. So, you go back to the board.
Brown Act for 200.
Okay, we'll stick with that category. Oh wait, did you give her candy? Okay. Here we go, a sub-series of substantive communication that ends up being among a majority of the board members.
Also, a wagon wheel meeting?
That's one way of describing it. The generic term we use is a serial meeting. Go ahead and do the answer. But there are different forms of the serial meeting. We can call it the hub and spoke or wagon wheel, where one person talks to each of the board members. That was the case back in the 70s, where the redevelopment agency manager talked to all 5 of the board members, and it wasn't really described in the case, but you assume that they then went out and did something that you would have expected to be in the board minutes, and it wasn't in the board minutes at all. That was that wagon wheel or hub and spoke kind of meeting. You also have the situation where board member number 1, the daisy chain, board member number 1 talks to board member number 2, who talks to board member number 3, and eventually you get to a majority of the full board having understood it. So serial meeting is our generic term for that. Next clue. One in the back.
Conflict of interest for 100.
For 100? Yeah. Okay, conflict of interest for 100. Government Code Section 1090, prohibits this type of contract. Who can you not enter into a contract with?
Your own business. Your own business.
Your own business, yes, good. The basic answer is with a board member. So it is absolutely prohibited by law to enter into, for a public agency to enter into a contract with a board member. And of course, that gets into a lot of gray areas. So now we have section 1091 and section 1091.5 and section 1092, and they all have these long lists of different kinds of more remote interests. No, that's not the kind of thing we meant to prohibit. But back in the 50s, there was a city, if I remember correctly, it was Hollister, and the only service station in town that was open at night was run by a guy who got on the city council. And they said, well, can't we keep taking our police one police car? Because, you know, small town, 50s, they only went around in the daytime with their police car, and so they wanted to get it serviced at night. Can't we keep taking it to his shop? And the Attorney General said, no, that's a contract with the board member, you're stuck. I said, well, it's really inconvenient to take it 20 miles away to the next town that has a service station open at night. And, well, he's cheaper than anybody else. And, you know, maybe some other shop in town would start opening at night if you told him you wanted him to. You know, it's just, it doesn't matter if it's inconvenient, it doesn't matter if it's a good deal. It just doesn't matter. You just cannot do business with a board member. Next clue. Make sure they get candy.
Forms for 100.
Okay, fun with forms for 100. This is the form that's sent to the Secretary of State and to the county clerk when the board roster or the district address changes. Anybody remember what that's called?
What's the change of information?
I forget exactly what the title is in the, it's in our, we put a copy of it in the packet. The statement of facts for the roster of public agencies. And the reason this is important for special districts is when you get sued. Most of us know that before you can sue a public agency, you have to file a claim with the agency and give them a chance to review it and tell you whether or not they're willing to pay you without litigation. If they can't find you to file the claim, they're excused from that requirement. So if you don't have a roster up to date that shows where the district office is, even if you haven't moved in 100 years and you're in the middle of the cemetery, that's where your office is, and everybody in town knows that, they can still be excused from that requirement. It's only cities and counties that don't have to do this. I guess on the theory that everybody knows where City Hall and the county office is. But for a school district, it's really important to get that form filed for purposes of those lawsuits. Because if you've got an up-to-date form on file and the person doesn't file a claim with you, that can be a complete defense to the lawsuit. Can, not necessarily always. It's, you know, a lot of things that go on with that. Give her some candy. Next clue.
Filling vacancies for 100.
Okay, filling vacancies for 100. The boards that are appointed by the Board of Supervisors do this when they want to fill a vacancy. Cemetery districts. Memorial districts are elected, so that's different. These are the appointed, the ones where they're always appointed by the board. So what do you do when you have a vacancy on your board?
Post it.
Pardon?
We post it.
That's not legally required for an appointed district. Go ahead.
You notify the board of elections, the election.
You're getting closer, because the answer is you contact the Board of Supervisors. So for the appointed bodies, which I believe the ones that are attending tonight, the only ones are the cemetery districts. There's a few other, do we have anybody from the Citrus Pest Control District? Yeah, no, so, well, which gives me a thought. What types of districts do we have represented here tonight? Are you all cemetery districts and memorial districts?
Water. Community services.
Community services districts?
Water district.
Water districts, awesome. Fire protection, yeah. Yeah, great.
No.
And well, that's why you're community services district, but, yeah, some of you provide more services than others. Some of you
Not
do
this
just snow, yeah, no, I wish you were providing snow removal services. Had some snow to be removed.
Just so you know, Government Code 1779 is in your handout, page 4, if you want to refer to that.
At the, behind this tab. So we did, and some of the materials, reference materials for this section didn't get copied, we don't know why, so they're loose in the back, some of the statutes and some of the other guidelines that we'll talk about. Next clue.
Trivia for 100?
I'm sorry?
County trivia for 100?
County trivia for 100. Tulare County has more of these animals than people. Cows, yes, very good.
Bonus points for the amount.
The statistics we found were, we had 489,000 dairy cows in 2012, but only 442,000 people in 22.
Trivia for 200.
Right, the trivia again? Okay, Tulare County trivia for 200. The highest point in Tulare County.
Mount Whitney.
Mount Whitney.
Oh, I remember which.
Yeah, Mount Whitney. That surprises people, but the crest of the Sierras is the county line. And so in Tulare County, that's Mount Whitney. It's pretty much straight east of, well, not quite straight east of here, but close. 14505.
Doing business.
Okay, doing business for
$400.
400, she says, okay. Contracts are usually legally binding if this happens.
They're signed.
They're notarized.
What is approved by the board?
There you go. Extra points for her. What is the contract is approved by the board. I don't care if it's signed. It can be signed by God and everybody. It can be notarized, but if it ain't in the board minutes, it didn't happen. And I once had a school district get out of a lawsuit on that basis. It was signed by the board president, or chairman, whatever they call him, but it wasn't in the board minutes. And so it wasn't an authorized contract.
And that's what Paul was saying during his discussion of strong internal controls and a board that actually takes notices the details of the contracts.
So when I review a contract for a special district, or somebody who's entering into a contract with a special district, we have a big long signature thing for the county with certifications by the clerk and that kind of stuff, which you don't necessarily have to do. But I always want to have a line in the contract where it says approved by governing board on, with a blank. So that if that's blank, it's like, okay, when was this approved by the board? Is this really binding on the district? Next clue.
Doing business 500.
Okay, doing business for 500. Special districts are not bound to this rule, which cities, counties, and special districts have to follow. Excuse me, cities, counties, and school districts have to follow.
Getting 3 bids.
That's actually one version of it. That wasn't the answer I was looking for here, but because that's a different question in this category. Anybody know about this obscure rule? Doesn't sound like it. Go ahead and click on it. There is a rule in the California Constitution that says cities, counties, and school districts cannot go into debt beyond the current fiscal year without voter approval. And so there's lots of loopholes to this. For example, if you enter into a multi-year lease, as long as it has a provision in it that says you can get out of it at the end of any fiscal year, each year you're only paying for that year, so you're not really in debt beyond the current fiscal year.
That goes to the assessor's office?
I don't know what form you're talking about. There's a concept for public agencies with the assessor where if you are renting out property you're not using to somebody in the private world, they have what the assessor calls a possessory interest, where they have a little bit of the value of the property is in private hands. And so there's special rules for how to make sure that you have a written lease agreement. You can make sure that you have to make sure that you put in the lease agreement that they're responsible for paying the taxes on that, or you can end up having to pay them for them. So the assessor and the possessory interest is a slightly different idea than what we're talking about here. This is just, if you want to enter into a agreement with a tractor company to buy that tractor over time, and you don't necessarily have to have that clause in your contract that says if we run out of money at the end of the fiscal year, we can cancel it. You can have a regular installment sales contract because you're not subject to this rule. But a school district can't have a regular installment sales contract on its school bus. It has to look like a lease with an option to purchase at the end. Now, it might be crazy for them to give up the lease in business terms because they paid as much as they would have under an installment sales contract. But it's got to look like a lease, and it has to truly have the option to dump it at the end of any fiscal year. So when we review those kinds of agreements for the county, or when we used to do school stuff for schools, we make sure it's got that appropriations clause and the opportunity to get out of the contract at the end of any fiscal year. And it's okay to agree to things like we won't get another one of the same product immediately, that kind of thing. But you don't have to worry about that. So you can do all the installment sales contracts you want. And so if you get people from the local school district saying, well, how can you enter into the contract beyond the end of the current fiscal year? That's prohibited. It's like, not for us. We're not subject to those rules. Next clue.
Fun with forms for 200.
Fun with forms for 200. This one is board members and designated employees file this form annually and at some other times. What's the conflict of interest form 700? Yes. And what's very confusing about these forms is that they have spaces for people to report absolutely every possible financial interest they might have personally. You don't have to complete every line of that form. You look at your agency's conflict of interest code and you see what kind of interest you have to report. Is that the next clue? Am I forgetting that? Oh, shoot. Gave it away already. Anyway, form 700, yes. Okay, next clue. Forgot what order I did the form.
Filling vacancies for 300.
Okay, filling vacancies for 300. It says resignation letters get filed here. That's a little tricky. Any ideas?
Board of Supervisors.
For the elected districts, they get filed with the Board of Supervisors. Or, excuse me, for the elected districts, they should actually get filed with the district. And for the appointed district, they should get filed with the Board of Supervisors. But you can file it both places to be on the safe side. But the idea is that the person who's going to appoint first should know first. And for an elected district, the district has the opportunity to fill the vacancy first. So the resignation letter should technically get filed with them, because it gets filed with the appointing authority. And then for the appointed districts, which I think the only ones here are the cemetery districts, it goes to the Board of Supervisors.
Brown Act for 300.
Brown Act for 300 is every agenda must include language that alerts the public to these two concerns.
Public comment and
The location of the agenda.
The time of the
There's, you're close on that one. I call them magic words. We have them in boxes on the Board of Supervisors agenda. There are these two little sets of magic words.
when and where. No?
That's the
Disability Act?
I got disability, yep.
Oh.
And not just the agenda, but the documents.
Okay.
So they come in at different times. So where somebody would go to get documents that were sent out later to the board members. So like, would they go to the district office? Where would they go to look at the board packet? If they, because you gotta remember, a lot of this stuff was written before the internet, and most agencies don't put their board packets on the internet anyway.
You have to have a special location for them, that's what I.
You have to have a special location where you say, you know, come and, if you want to look at the documents that went out to the board or that were going out to the board after the agenda was posted, here's where to go. And it's usually the district office. I usually recommend like having a binder. You just got a binder at the front desk. So if anybody comes in, here's the materials for the next board meeting open session. And anybody can come in and look at those.
Speaking of that, if a member of the public comes in and says that they want a copy of the board meetings mailed to them, is it true that it has to be done for a full year?
The question is, can someone subscribe to receiving the board packets in the mail for the open session documents? And the answer is yes. The Brown Act has provided since the 50s, I think, that if somebody wants to subscribe, you can do a subscription and make them pay for that, for the cost to you of sending them a full copy of everything. Now, when Fresno County, where I used to work, started putting it on the internet, the number of people who wanted to get it by mail dropped from like 150 to 2. So they really got rid of it because people didn't really want all that paper if they could avoid it. But most of you aren't putting things on the internet like that.
How long are you obligated to do this?
As long as you set up your subscription for. So it would certainly, the statute refers to a yearly renewal. But you figure out what it costs and charge them for the year up front. You know, then they could subscribe for the year, and maybe it'll be a different charge next year because your postage is going up, or the board packets are getting fatter.
Can I ask another
Yeah,
question?
they're entitled to get it by mail if they want to.
Are they, if they want copies of contracts and actual bills that come into the office, are they entitled to that?
Okay, the question is, are members of the public entitled to public records that would be in the form of bills, invoices, actual contracts? Most of the time, yes. Lawyer bills are different. During a particular piece of litigation, they can't get anything. After the litigation is over, they can get the totals. But they never get the detailed invoices from the attorney.
So you don't give them a copy?
You would not give them a copy of the attorney bill. Most other bills, you'd have to give them a copy. Because you can pretty much guarantee that if a court is going to come down on the side of the public, what type of situation are they most likely to come down on the side of the public on? Spending money. So if it deals with spending taxpayer money, you can almost guarantee the court's going to bend over backwards to say the underlying documents for that are a public record, and you have to give them to anybody who requests them.
In 10 days.
Well, technically, under the Public Records Act, you have to tell them within 10 days whether you're going to give it to them.
Oh, okay.
And then you provide them promptly. But, you know, if they're sitting there in a file on your desk, and they want to see this month's invoices, that's pretty easy. If they want to see all of the bills that you paid to your groundskeeper 5 years ago, it may take you a while to come up with those, or you may not even have them anymore. And so you can respond within 10 days that, well, we're going to have to look for those because they're buried in the box in the garage, kind of thing.
Can you charge them?
Yes, you can charge them a reasonable duplication fee. I don't know what most people are charging nowadays. I don't know if it's still 10 cents a page or not.
They used to do 10 cents, I think they went up to 20.
We're still doing 10 cents a page here. I think KPOS is 15 now, so that would probably be reasonable. But unfortunately, you can't charge people for time you spend going and finding them. And in some cases, there's a case on, you can't charge them for redacting the names of the confidential aspects of that. That happened to be special ed case records. So they were deleting the names of the individual students. that were involved. And they couldn't charge for the time they spent doing that.
How about fund with forms for $300?
Fund with forms for $300. This code must be reviewed every other year. Any ideas on that? Your conflict of interest code, which ties into Form 700, because the instructions page for Form 700 says, if you're a code filer, you only have to report what it says in your conflict of interest code that you have to report. Now, my favorite example for this is Fresno County had a very detailed conflict of interest code. They did it by individual departments. And so each department had its own code. And the library really narrowed it down. They had several people with the same job title who purchased different kinds of materials. And so they said in their conflict of interest code that if you were the buyer for the children's materials for the library, the only financial interest they wanted you to report was interest in the kinds of companies that you dealt with. They didn't care if the person in that position owned the property next door to every potential library site in the county. They weren't in the chain of decision making for real property. So they didn't have to report any of their interests in real property in Fresno County. Same thing is true for your board members, for your manager. Look at your conflict of interest code. Keep it up to date. See what it says about what positions have, obviously it's going to be board members and the manager, but are there any other positions that have to report any financial interests? And have you reasonably limited what financial interests they have to report? That form is designed for people who have to report everything. It's got everything. Every possible financial interest you could have is in that form, but you don't necessarily have to fill it all out. The first page of those instructions says, go and look at your conflict of interest code and see what you have to disclose. So if you're a board member and your manager gives you the Form 700, say, well, give me a copy of the conflict of interest code. I don't know what I have to report. They should be able to find that and give that to you. If they can't, you need to go look through the board minutes and find it. I hate to tell you this, but as the code reviewing body, our clerk has not been keeping copies of your codes when you turn them in to get reviewed by us. I don't know if they are now, but they weren't back when. So if you can't find your old one, you might have to go back and redo it. Next clue.
Conflict of interest for 200.
Conflict of interest for 200. Employees automatically do this if they are elected to the board of their own agency.
What is the resignation?
What is they resign when they're sworn into office. This actually came up for the Fresno Irrigation District, I think it was. They had an employee who ran for the board and was actually elected, and I don't know what was going on at this private firm that was advising the district, but they missed the statute that had been enacted like 10 years before that said this. And so they were like, oh yeah, you can serve on the board of your own agency. It's like, not anymore, you can't. They actually had to put in a statute about this because there were people who were serving on the boards of their own agencies.
I thought you had to wait 2 years before you could
Yeah, she's talking about remembering something about conflicts of interest with a year or 2 years in it. There is a rule. I said 1090 has come up with this long list of exceptions over the years. Well, one of them is for employees whose spouses later get elected to the board. They don't lose their jobs just because their spouse got elected to the board. As long as they were employed at least 1 year before the person got elected to the board. How they deal with it then, under the Attorney General opinions, this happens for some reason it happens all the time in school districts. They seem to be the ones that have all the employees with spouses on the board. They can't get any individual treatment. The board can still enter into contracts with the union. They can still get the same benefits that everybody else gets, but they can't do anything individual. They can't get a promotion. They can't get a raise that's just them. They're kind of stuck in their current position as long as their spouse is on the board. And I remember reading in the Fresno paper that there was a board member who resigned from the board because his wife really wanted to apply for this promotion. And she was just ineligible as long as he was on the board. Next clue.
Conflict of interest for 300.
Okay. If a board member has this type of financial interest, the rest of the board can still enter into a contract. Anybody remember the technical name for this? It's called, one of the lists of exceptions under 1090 is called the remote interests. And this is also the approach that they use for the interests that you have under the Political Reform Act, where maybe you own the property next door to the property the district is looking at. The general idea is, unlike those prohibited contracts under 1090, as long as you abstain properly, you don't participate in anything, and you're not legally required to, but it's probably tidier just to completely leave the room, so you're not even doing body language that influences the rest of the board. The rest of the board can enter into the contract. So as long as the person with the financial interest abstains. And so that can be a really handy thing if you're dealing with one of those more gray areas. And one of the other things that's handy is that the Fair Political Practices Commission will provide advice. So if there's an upcoming vote that you know about where it's in one of those gray areas where you're not sure if you have to abstain as a board member, if you give them at least 2 or 3 weeks, they can help you work through, and you give them all the right facts, and they tell you you can vote on it, and then later on, that immunizes you from any claim that you shouldn't have voted on it later. Advice from our office won't do that, but the FPPC won't come after you later if they tell you it's okay for you to participate and all the facts were accurate. Next clue.
Conflict of interest or
Next conflict of interest, 400, she said. A public official is disqualified from participating in a governmental decision when the official has this.
Directing.
Right. That's what they call it under the Political Reform Act is a personal financial interest. And again, the Political Reform Act is like 1090 in the sense that it has this long list of nuances where you go through this stack of stuff in the regulations and figure out, well, are they a public official? Are they participating in a decision? What kind of financial interest in it? How direct is the interest? If they own 3 shares in Exxon and we're buying gas at the Exxon station, that's probably not going to be a problem. But if they own the gas station, it might be a problem. Or if their spouse owns the gas station, it might be a problem. That kind of thing. Next clue.
Brown Act for 400.
Which one? Brown Act for 400. The Brown Act is not like this set of rules. Any ideas?
Robert's rules.
Robert's rules, yes. One of the things I do in our formal Brown Act training when we offer that is point out that the Brown Act doesn't care about all the kinds of things Robert's rules cares about. It has nothing about motions, seconds, minutes, quorum, out of order. It has one thing about adjournment. The Brown Act is really focused on the relationship between the board and the public. So it doesn't really talk about the internal workings of the board at all. It doesn't care about the board officers. That's what bylaws are for. So all of you should have bylaws that address those kinds of things.
Trivia for 300?
Trivia for 300. Tulare County was named after this plant. The Tuileries, yes, yes. When I was, although the last time, when I looked at the answer yesterday, when I was looking at it, it actually said we were named after Tulare Lake, but Tulare Lake was named after the Tule Rush. I thought Tule was a Spanish word, and it turned out to be an Aztec word. And this plant grows in marshes all over North America, including Mexico. And so when the Spanish got here, they'd already been in Mexico, and they said, oh, there's another one of those plants the Indians in Mexico called tules, or what they heard as tule, or what came into English as tule. And so they called him Tully's up here too. Next clip. Brown Act for 500. This item must be on every regular meeting agenda. We had this answer earlier. What is public comment? Right. Right. You have to have a separate public comment item on every regular meeting agenda. Now, we had a guy in Southern California who complained that when they moved the public comment item from the beginning of the agenda to the end, and it was an evening meeting, and so nobody was left to hear all his rants at the end of the meeting, and he thought that was a First Amendment violation and filed a federal lawsuit. And the federal court said, they let you comment. They had the public comment time. Where's the First Amendment violation here? I mean, they let you spout off on everything. It was within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board, so he was spouting off appropriately, but if you've got a gadfly you don't like, you can move the public comment time to the end of the meeting. Of course, then they sit there and they get madder and madder over the course of the evening about everything else, and there's more to complain about, so you might want to leave the public comment time at the beginning, but...
But can the public, if you're right in the middle of your meeting, can that public person interrupt and say, I want to make a public comment?
Okay, the question is, what about the public commenting on agenda items? And
No, just general public comment.
oh, you've already had the public comment time and they weren't there.
And we're right in the middle.
And they want to comment on something that's not on the agenda. Oh, they're absolutely out of order. You can say, no, we don't do public comment on items that aren't on the agenda at this point in the meeting. If you want to make a public comment on something that's within the subject matter of this board that's not on the agenda, you should have been here when we started, because that's when we heard that item.
But that doesn't mean that she's asking questions about something that's on the agenda. She just wants to make a public comment.
Yeah, no. You can say no. You can say no.
You're out of order.
You're out of order. We've already heard that item.
Thank you.
She's not referring to an item on the agenda, she's referring to the public comment time, which if it's at the end of the meeting, you can tell that person public comment is at the end of the meeting.
Right. It depends where the public comment time is on your agenda. If you've got this item on the agenda, if you've had it at the beginning and they missed it, that's their problem.
You can also set up for the next meeting that they could bring that up, whatever it is that you're talking about, right?
Right. You can certainly, and you can say that's out of order now. We've gone on to other items on our agenda, but you're certainly welcome to come back to our next board meeting and make public comments. But what I thought you meant was commenting on agenda items. And the Brown Act does specifically say that you have to give the public an opportunity to comment before or during any agenda item. So if they want to comment on a particular agenda item, you should not squash that. You should certainly let them contribute. They might have something valuable to say. They might not, but that's why you're on the board, is to listen to people. Pardon? Do you want to do Final Jeopardy now? Yeah. Or is it 9 o'clock? No. We gotta at least do. What else?
Let's do the Tulare tree.
We gotta do the $500 one as a Tulare County tribute. We'll at least do that one. The end of the trail statue, which is now in Mooney Grove Park, was originally displayed at this.
The entrance to the park.
No. Where was it originally displayed before it was moved? He knows. Say it louder.
Panama Pacific Exposition.
The Panama Pacific Exposition. After they opened the Panama Canal, they had this exposition. Sorry, I'm not an expert Jeopardy clue writer. What is the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition in San Francisco? And at that time, they couldn't get hold of drawings because it was during World War I, and so it was just done in plaster. And they had several other statues, and they dumped them in the trash afterward. And some people from Visalia went up there and got this one and another one. and brought him down here and put him in Mooney Grove Park. And then,
Museum of Cowboys?
yes, and then the Cowboy Museum came out and said, can we have the plaster one? And we'll give you a bronze one instead. And of course they said, well, yeah. Because the other plaster one had fallen apart so much they couldn't do anything with it, but that one was still usable. And so we now have the bronze replica here, and you can still go see the original plaster one in the Cowboy Museum in Oklahoma City. That's what it says on Wikipedia.
What year was this, 1901?
1915 was the original Panama Pacific Exposition in San Francisco. There's that kind of small domy building somewhere in San Francisco. I think that's the only structure that's left from that.
Golden Gate Park.
Yeah, I forget where that little domy thing is. It's a little small. But okay, well, we've kind of run out of time, so we will go on to Final Jeopardy.
Okay.
Can I have it?
Final Jeopardy. You may be found personally liable and your personal assets could be at risk if you engage in any of these 3 types of activities.
Think about that for a minute. I'll play this a little Hey, he's got it. He's got it. Say that louder.
Sexual harassment, retaliation, I'm trying to think of it.
Operating without liability insurance. Taxes, and not having workers' comp.
Okay, go ahead.
Wow.
Discrimination, harassment, retaliation, just to see if you remember the